Hopefully you won't need that today.
Actually, be appropriate. Probably remind people to pull their mics closer to them too. Still working through the AV here. No. Okay. Go ahead and call to order. Welcome. It is July 26th, and this is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County's Recipient Rights Advisory Committee. And I need you to go ahead, and Brianna Fowler will be presenting. So the suggested motion is to approve the July 26, 2024 RRAC meeting agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Is there any discussion?
Is this appropriate where we add the Holland Hospital semi-annual report? They had sent a request on Wednesday with their semi-annual report asking our committee to review it. So I have a copy of it. It's super quick. It doesn't require a motion. It's just kind of for information only. So I was thinking maybe right after ours.
You want to amend the agenda to include that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that, and we can do it with other business here, and that would be under new business. Item C, we can add it to that. It would be item 9. Does that sound fair? Put it someplace else in
Wherever
the
you'd
middle of
like.
that body.
It
So,
doesn't matter, wherever you'd like to hear it.
completely, yeah, your workflow. So,
I think maybe a C.
okay,
Just past B under the CMHOC
Yep.
semi-annual report, and then we'll make policy D and the use E.
you're gonna make it E?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. All right. Okay, so we have an amendment on the table, so with the amendment of the agenda, do I have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
There's support?
Support.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and all those in favor, please say aye. Same sign. And we still have the other motion on the agenda or on the table right now, and that is to approve the July 26, 2024 RRAC meeting agenda as stated now with the amendment.
Perfect.
Do you have a motion? We have a motion, so we'll go ahead and vote on that. I'm sorry. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. We are moving on to review and approve the minutes from March 24, 2024. The suggested motion is to approve the March 22nd, 2024 RRAC meeting minutes,
Which you don't have.
which we don't have.
So
So-
Patricia took the minutes, and it appears Amanda is the only one who has access to her file, and she is out of the country. So therefore, there
Okay.
was no minutes to attach. So when Amanda comes back, we can send them out, or we can look at them at the next RRAC, whatever you would prefer to do.
Let's table that.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to table? Action item number 3.
So moved.
Support.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll table that until our next recipient rights meeting then?
Perfect.
Or can we do that at the next CMHOC?
Probably
meeting.
RRAC recipient rights.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and that date to be determined, and we'll add it into the
It'll
the
be the
meeting minutes?
September, yeah.
September.
yep.
Okay. All right, next up on the agenda. Oh, so we need to vote. Sorry, all those in favor of tabling? The action item number 3, to approve the March 22nd, 2024 RRAC meeting minutes in September. Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The motion passes. Moving on to public comment. And so, do we have anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. And there's no motion needed for this first one. It is CMHOC, so Community Mental Health of Ottawa County Recipient Rights Director's Report for 3/24 through 6/24. See attachment. Brianna, you are up.
All right. Excuse me, my allergies are terrible
I know.
right now, so I apologize for all the coughs. I have attached just the quarterly report. It's not really a quarterly report because we skipped June. I'm always on vacation, so it covers 4 months for the complaints that were received and closed out. So you have March 2024, there were 4 complaints that were received and 4 that were closed out. I'm looking at my complaint log right now. For example, the complaints that came in, disclosure of confidential information, that I believe both of those were accidental emails sent to an unintended recipient. So somebody typed in, for example, I'm Brianna Fowler. I work at Community Mental Health of Ottawa County. We had an epidemiologist at the Public Health Department. Her name was Brianna Flower. So for example, it could be something like similar to that, where Brianna Flower got the information that Brianna Fowler was intended to have, and it contained maybe a case number, a name, a first name, last name, initial. It could have been an attachment, but that's an example of like what those 2 disclosures of confidential information included. Let's see. Excuse me. We had a neglect where I believe someone didn't get medications as prescribed, and then an abuse class 2 allegation for unreasonable force that was in an outpatient program where there wasn't necessarily imminent risk of harm to self, harm to staff, harm to others. And we had a staff person put hands on to like redirect one of the recipients. And so that's considered abuse class 2, unreasonable force, because in order to put your hands to forcefully like move somebody, help somebody gain control, there needs to be imminent risk of harm. So
Can I ask,
Sure.
would you mind doing it by complaint number as we're following? I think I'm following you.
Oh,
but it
okay.
might be
Yes, I was just
important.
doing
Yeah,
the
'cause I
last
think you're doing the
4.
substantiated. Yeah.
Yep, the
Okay.
last 4 that were opened,
Okay.
those are the ones I was referring to 3708.
Okay.
So then in April, we received 5 complaints and closed out 4. It looks like, let's see,
This is kind of.
4 of the 5 complaints, or 3 of the 5 complaints that we received, so 3710, 3713, 3714, all included no code out of jurisdictions. So that's, somebody makes a complaint about their mom, their dad, their sister, their brother. They're making a complaint about Holland Hospital or someone I don't have jurisdiction with. So those are the no code out of jurisdictions examples. And then 3711, we had a dignity and respect. So that could be anything with, calling somebody by a name that they don't prefer. It could be not respecting what they're choosing, laughing at somebody, just making somebody feel that they weren't treated with dignity and respect. And then we had a neglect class 3 in April, which again is staff not doing something that was required by law, policy, guideline, and individual plan of service, a written directive. So, I used a medication error as an example. That's a written script. If somebody doesn't give a medication that could have put that person at risk of harm, that's why it becomes neglect. It could be a staff texting and driving because it's against the law, for an example of neglect. In May, you will see that we didn't receive any complaints, which sometimes isn't abnormal. We have some months that are high generators and some that are low, and I would consider May is typically kind of slow. So that gave me an opportunity then to close out 4 complaints in May that had been previously opened. And then June, we received 1 complaint and then closed out 3 complaints. And the complaint that came in for June was number 3715. The category was abuse class 3. So that's the use of language to degrade, threaten, harass a recipient. So that could be, I think the allegation was that the staff person was using swear words while interacting with one of our clients. And so they didn't care for that much. And so, you know, it could have been used in a derogatory fashion or used to threaten the recipient in some way. And so therefore, abuse class 3 is the classification for that one. Any questions on the complaints?
Yes, Brianna, I do. Can you give us an example of, like, for these outcomes, what a reprimand might typically look like, or a verbal counseling?
Sure. So anytime that we establish a rights violation, that includes, I don't even know, probably if there's 90 rights violations in the Michigan Mental Health Code, Chapter 7, 85 of them, if they're substantiated, require remedial action. So that could be a verbal coaching where the supervisor sits down with them, they go through the situation, and they problem solve for future. How do we prevent recurrence of this incident? And so the supervisor is saying, you know, this wasn't appropriate. And then they're coaching them verbally on how to do it better the next time. That was what I would see a verbal coaching be. If there's a substantiated abuse, neglect, retaliation, harassment, restraint or seclusion, all of those require disciplinary action per the Michigan Mental Health Code. And so a verbal coaching, if you saw an abuse, a retaliation, harassment, or a violation of restraint or seclusion, if you saw verbal coaching in that outcome category, that would not be sufficient to meet the letter of the law. So the minimum for a disciplinary action is a written reprimand for the staff up to employment termination. And so that's up to the employer because I don't work in the programs. I don't know if maybe the individuals had 4 no-call, no-shows for shifts and, you know, 1 substantiated neglect violation that, like a neglect 3 that could have put the person at risk of harm. The employer might say, all right, you know, we're just going to terminate employment. Thanks for the past 6 months type of thing. So, and that would be, of course, you know, written reprimands that goes into their personnel file. They actually get that first step where it goes into their personnel file. A lot of times, like you'll see training on here for a lot of our other categories, like a dignity and respect, a breach of confidentiality, et cetera, where the staff have to maybe meet with me and have retraining, or I go to a team meeting and do a recipient rights in-person update for staff. So it could mean a variety of different things. Does that help?
Yeah, is there a code citation that, you know, I could find or the public could find to get a description of each of the criteria for the different outcomes that are expected to be followed?
The Michigan, I can give you a citation. It'll just say remedial or disciplinary action, but yeah, I can send that to you.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I could add some information if it would be helpful.
Okay.
For the board, the Recipient Rights Board and the public, all complaints that are substantiated or all investigations then get reviewed after recipient rights. And by the way, this is our entire recipient rights apparatus for over 4,000 people served. Okay. And you know, the last several months, I've said we have one. So we're looking at, one of the roles of this board is look, do we have enough resources to ensure, and we're doing the best we can. In fact, this is an award-winning recipient rights officer several years in a row throughout the state. However, the executive director of each CMH must sign and help navigate the disciplinary process. So is there a written criteria of like this equals that? No, there isn't. Besides, you shall take action. But Brianna, in conjunction with me, helped determine the level of outcome that's there. So the executive director of each CMH is involved and has to be involved in signing every one of these investigations that come in and ensuring the level of discipline is sufficient. Just to remind the public and the Recipient Rights Board, if you've never sat in this before, recipient rights is different than, say, other legal entities that could also press charges like, for abuse and neglect. So recipient rights descriptions of those are all in the mental health code and our policies, but there are other organizations and other entities that can also take action. Recipient rights is not a legal body. No one goes to jail with our kind of findings. However, we are to appropriately notify any such agency if we feel that it rises to that level. So there isn't per se like, oh, this equals termination. I think attachment B or amendment B in your packet has a list of how many of each we had in here, but it's not a science, it's an art. And something that my office takes extremely seriously. I will say, just in general comments, I know Brianna, I didn't tell her I was going to do this, so bear with me. There's a difference between like an incident report and what rises to the level of a recipient rights complaint. In our system, all incident reports get put into a central kind of location. And then Brianna screens them along with us, say which one of these incident reports rise to the level that warrants an investigation. And so that's why you'll see kind of different stats on that. We are in the process of examining that whole system to ensure we have enough resources in the rights department so we don't under-investigate. So just some introductory comments I probably should have made at the beginning.
Thank you.
No, thank you for the thorough explanation. So we're subject then to an audit potentially if we don't follow through, because I was going to ask about follow through. Because you have given the citation with an expected outcome, do you follow up then, circle back to make sure that the organization has in fact implemented your
Yep.
recommendations?
So they're not my recommendations. I just require disciplinary action or remedial action. It's the employer that comes back with, we are doing this
Okay.
and we did that on this date. And so then that's up to Michael and I to say, is it sufficient? Does it meet the letter of the law? If it was abuse and neglect and they took, oh, we're just going to make our staff do training, him and I are going to say, sorry, that doesn't meet the letter of the law. That's not sufficient.
Okay.
You're going to have to send us a new plan of correction. Some employers send me their proposed plan of correction, like we will do a written reprimand with this person by this date. And then, yes, I would follow up with them and say, did you do this? And send me proof. And so they typically will send me another proof saying this was done. And they usually actually send me the whole written reprimand thing that's been placed in their personnel file. And then I update the summary report that Michael and I author that goes out to the complainant, the recipient, and if the recipient has a parent or guardian, depending if they're a minor or an adult with a court-appointed guardian. And then again, reassess, was that action sufficient? Does it meet the letter of the law?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good explanation.
thank you.
Any
could I,
other questions? Yes,
Could
Mr.
I make
Byrd.
a comment?
Yes.
I was chagrined when I read the letter of the law in the material you sent out, because I realize I've probably violated it on numerous occasions inadvertently. And an example might be interacting with some of my daughter's fellow residents in a group home setting. We have a rapport,
Mhm.
and it includes maybe some kidding or some lighthearted comments. I might have inadvertently technically violated one of these restrictions. Another example might be if there's a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit and I'm doing 51 miles an hour. Have I violated the law? Well, yes, I have. But the police officers have some judgment in determining whether that's a significant violation or something that can be ignored, or simply a reminder that, you were 1 mile an hour over the speed limit is sufficient. Do you have the same latitude in assessing the significance? I realize you've got very strict requirements here that are probably violated every day across the system. Do you have some ability to have judgment as to whether or not it's substantial enough to require action?
Like you said, I'm sure people violate rights every day. Do I know about them? I don't know about them until somebody tells me about them. And so if I had somebody who called me and said, the staff was driving with my son in the car, and my son reports that, the staff was going 54 or 50 and a 45, because, speed is super important to that person. I would open up a complaint and I would go look at it, whether I would substantiate it or not. Can you prove it? I don't know, were there any other witnesses? But I think, my only ability to decipher is if I establish a rights violation or not. And so, if somebody comes to me and it's a potential rights violation, I mean, it would have to be a potential rights violation. It couldn't be just because, you wanted it a certain way. It would have to fall in the letter of the law. But if it was close, in some families, you'd be like, well, I have to open up a rights violation now, a complaint, and I have to look into this. And oh my goodness, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And it's part of your job. And in training, we tell staff, the Recipient Rights Office is here for a reason. I mean, we look at things. So you are going to have to talk to me at some point in your career. It's just part of what we do. And it's part of protecting the most vulnerable individuals that we serve. So do I have leeway? Kind of, sort of, I guess, once I determine if I'm going to substantiate or not.
Thank you.
Even healthcare, having an atmosphere of safe reporting though too. So, it's like, do we over or under report based upon punitive, possibilities as well? It's always kind of that dilemma, where do you get kind of a nice balance of we're reporting the right things, and we're not reporting some things that require some discernment, possibly like joking, for instance. But I think the clearer the standards are, or, the rules, the easier it is to actually apply.
Yeah. And, the Michigan Mental Health Code, it's not black and white. It's very gray, and it's up for interpretation. So the way I would interpret, a dignity and respect is not maybe how a Network 180, a Washtenaw County rights officer director is also, doing the same thing.
Mhm.
So I do know, like, providers that serve multiple counties get a bit frustrated because we all are different human people, right? And we do have those different interpretations, but I don't know. I try, when I teach staff, we're a team. If you're not sure what's going on, if you feel like there's a rights violation, you need to call. We need to talk about it. Don't feel like you have to do this by yourself. I try to make it as inviting as possible. Like, I'm not a scary person. I'm a person just like you. I just have this job, and let's work together, because I'd rather be proactive than something bad happen.
Right. It's not often that it's bad people. Sometimes it's bad processes or
Yeah.
a lack of resources, as you
Absolutely.
described. So we
Absolutely.
can fix those things. There's a solution to that.
Yeah.
Do you know, like investigated, and I promise to move on here, but when, if there's an investigation and it's unfounded, is that tracked as well?
I'm looking at like the semi-annual report that's coming up. We do track
Do you?
those that aren't
Okay.
substantiated. But on the summary, it gives a percentage of those that were.
Okay.
So,
Just looking for a safe atmosphere for reporting. So,
For sure.
No, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, thank you very much.
Yep.
Brianna.
So then just keep going with the quarterly report. Dr. Bashirs was talking about, the difference. We're transitioning now from recipient rights complaints to then incident reports, which are different. We're doing an analysis to
Mhm.
see how we can track them better. I receive all of them. I review every single incident report. The majority of the incident reports are scratches and falls and things like of that nature. But we do have some, probably 10 to, depends on the month, I guess. It could be 2, it could be 20 of physical management where staff need to report there was imminent risk to the recipient. They physically intervened, what approved technique they used, how long they used it, did they need to do it multiple times, et cetera. That information gets then shared to other committees for review and tracking. It doesn't just stop with me. Medication errors, significant medication errors, those also go to a committee for additional tracking. If it's a significant error, higher medication dose given, wrong meds to wrong person, wrong route, et cetera. We have a registered nurse who does verbal coaching with staff. So some of our providers have registered nurses on duty that also do that. But it's our policy per our medication manual that our nurse at CMHOC does verbal coaching with everybody who's involved in a significant medication error. So she completes a form. That form then gets sent back to the committee for review to see if there's anything further that needs to be done. So, unusual incidents get reported. I review them, but it doesn't just stop with me. It goes on to other committees. Critical incident reports, so harm to self, harm to others, requiring emergency medical treatment, deaths, hospitalizations, things like that nature. Those go in a critical incident report that goes to the compliance committee. It also gets reported to the Lakeshore Regional Entity, it gets reported to the state. You know what I mean? So there's lots of different groups, I guess, looking at these unusual incidents.
Yeah,
And you'll
we'll-
see, there's a lot of
We'll be
them.
bringing, what I'm going to be creating is a quarterly report. Folks can see about the type, the number, how we handle these things, because we do track incidents internally. But I think you'd be surprised how many potential incidents you could have every day, like in our group home settings or anything with medications. There are thousands of opportunities every day to not do it right.
Mhm.
Right. So you could have a fleet of 30 employees doing nothing but this. However, I'm not satisfied in my initial look on we don't have enough resources, in my opinion, to really look at incident reports to recipient rights. We do the best we can with it. We've been doing a great job. But I'm concerned that we're not spending enough time with deliberating the type of incidents, the remedial actions, and the systems fixes we need to do in the system. So if we see trend data, say for quality or compliance issues on a particular thing, how we really, is that now on a performance improvement plan for the organization? How are we doing that? So as part of my initial 90-day evaluation, we're looking at those aspects, and you'll have some recommendations coming in August on some potential system changes that will allow the board and the public to know a little bit more what's going on in this area. I always worry about underreporting, not overreporting.
Right.
I don't want a culture of compliance and, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the health and safety and dignity and respect of all of our recipients and staff are upheld. So this is a very critical aspect of what we do, and one of the rationales for a public mental health system. this is one of our roles, is to be the safety net and to ensure dignity and respect to all of our services. And so I'm not sure we have a lot of people working on it, but I'm not exactly sure at this time if we have as efficient as a system and the actual software to track it that we have. And so we're looking into that, and you'll see some further movement of that in August and September.
You could make it a culture of learning by, you know,
Yes.
reporting, honestly. Yeah.
It's a culture of care that respects the dignity and rights of both staff, employees, and public. But it's hard because I got one.
This is just for show and tell. This is my stack from like 3 days,
Right.
Oh, boy.
right? Like, and I'm getting all of them. And so he talks about data and analyzing it. That's not my strong suit. I'm a social worker, right? So it'll be awesome to have somebody else who can put their eyes on this information and do something better with it than maybe
Is there
what I'm
software,
able to do.
software available
Yeah.
for you? Okay, good. Let that do the
Oh my goodness.
analyzing for
Yep,
you at least.
yep.
Yeah.
And we
turning
have, I mean, we
analyzing,
have
yeah.
a system
Right.
and it's great. We can sort, we can do all kinds of things. We can run reports. It's just,
I'm smiling because it's Microsoft Access from like 1996.
Oh, no, you
I
know,
guess.
I even know that.
Okay, we'll have to use a chalkboard at this point, but okay.
It's the rudimentary analysis, yes. Mr. Burry?
Thank you for your hard
This,
work.
Thank you.
this may not be the appropriate time, maybe during the director's report, but
Yeah.
I remember 15, 20 years ago, we had a statistician on staff. I think it was Dr. Lubbers.
Yes.
And he was not an administrative employee in terms of programs. His job was to crunch the numbers, analyze trends, and try to digest it and produce information to help you make better decisions. And if to the extent that you can work towards that kind of a resource, that'd be wonderful.
You'll be pleased to know Dr. Lubers is back. We signed a contract with this company, IBH. We've been using them for a
Wow.
while, but we're going to increase it.
All right.
Hence this big stack you
Yeah,
got there. Is
maybe.
that?
I have more to catch up on, so I'll keep going. Meetings, I still participate in, you know, a handful of meetings, either monthly or quarterly. Yeah, there's not much to say about that, but. And then site reviews, they're just starting to kind of ramp up. It's summertime or coming into fall. I think the majority of my recipient rights site visits are start next month. So August, September, October. There's a bunch of homes that I get done, but I've done about 29 so far this year, in addition to all the other things that I do. But I'd say this every quarter that we meet. I love going to our sites. It is probably like my favorite thing other than doing investigations. I really love that too. But I just really enjoy having that at least annual face-to-face interaction with our providers. It's not just our adult foster care homes, it's our CLS groups, it's our you know, some of our social rec groups, all that kind of stuff. And it's nice because I get to conquer and divide with all the rights offices in the region. But yeah, this is one of my favorite things that has come back to me that I haven't done in a while. In addition to the next thing, training. I just started doing in-person trainings again. It has been since COVID 2020 since I've done any in-person trainings. Network 180 was gracious and we're so grateful for all of their assistance and their help. They came up with virtual training for the last 4 years, 3.5 years. And they were so awesome at letting our staff from Ottawa County join their virtual training. But they too are struggling with some resources, and they also are transitioning away from the virtual training back to in-person training. And so it's fair, right? It's time for me to take that back. And that's another part of my job that I love. I love to meet staff. and just have that face to face, because I'll tell you what, for the last 3.5 years, walking around our building, if somebody doesn't have a tag on and they ask me to let them in the door, I'm like, I'm sorry. Do you have a tag? Because I don't know who they are. I haven't seen them yet. So if they're new staff, you know, they always have to come through my training within 30 days of hire. So if I have a face with a name, I'm like, oh, hey, I met you before. Yes, come on in. I know you're a staff person here and you need my help getting in because you forgot your tag, right? That kind of thing. Instead of like, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to walk around to the front door type of reaction is what I would normally do. But yeah, I've taught one class so far. I think I had like 6 or 7 people in there. I have 2 classes scheduled in August. And I have bigger classes, I believe, that are already registered. So that's really exciting to me. But we still offer the online version from Improving MI Practices, because in-person training is not it for everybody. And the times and days that I choose do not, work in everybody's schedule. And the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Office of Recipient Rights just recently, or are currently in the process of updating that rights training on the Improving MI Practices site. So it's going to be in modules if it's not already. I think there's 4 modules. It allows a person to do it at their own pace. They can stop if they need to take a break. And then if, say there's a rights violation and we need staff to have some retraining, we can assign a particular module in that Improving MI Practices training. Say, they're struggling with identifying abuse and neglect and reporting immediately. We can say, you need to take, or suggest to the employer, please have them take module 3 again on Improving MI Practices, because that's specific to abuse, neglect, and immediate reporting. So I think it's going to be a great option. I'm excited about in-person trainings. I'm excited that the state has updated the Improving MI Practices site, or is in the process. So yeah, I think it's all good. It's good transition.
Excited for you. It's called Going to Gemba in Lean. If you ever
Yeah.
learned about, going where the work is.
Yeah.
That's a lot more fun than just supposition on a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you can, I think, elicit some really good conversations with staff when you're in person training, and make a safe space where, okay, this isn't to get anybody in trouble, but if you've had a situation, well, let's problem solve here so we don't have that again.
Relationship building.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Oh. Are we moving on to your D, or where are you at? B? B, your report. Okay.
Yep, so the
same.
semi-annual report is attached. Mine is, at least. So the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Office of Recipient Rights just obtained the Director of Recipient Rights from Network 180. So he is really Ramey Postema's right-hand guy, right-hand person.
Mhm.
And he's super IT savvy. And so he has improved the semi-annual report and hopefully the annual report coming up in December so much. It was so easy to do. And it generated the data summary that I attached, which was super nice because it tells you right from all the information that I inputted. So far, from October to March, we had received 20 complaints, including 17 allegations. 17 investigations were completed on those 17 allegations. I do not do interventions. I do all investigations. Of the 17 allegations, 11 complaints were substantiated, which popped up the percentage of I substantiated a rights violation 65% of the time. And then it highlighted some complaint categories, so it doesn't include all of them, and I did not pick these. It was the report that generated them. 2 complaints received in the abuse 1, 2, and 3 categories. Both were substantiated. Again, for the neglect 1, 2, and 3, both were substantiated. 5 dignity and respects with 2 substantiated. And then it talks about like services suited to condition. I received 1. And then no right involved outside jurisdiction, there were 3. So that's your difference between the 20 complaints received and 17 investigated, because 3 did not include a code protected right or were outside of my jurisdiction. And then it then populated the remedial action summaries for those 17 that were investigated.
I'm sure you track this year over year,
Yep.
just trending purposes.
Yep.
Do you know how many people we serve?
I would have to look on the last annual report, but I feel like the last annual report, I felt
Don't
like
have
there
to
was
even
like
tell me each day. I'm just
3,500.
curious as kind of.
It's probably more now, but
Yeah.
see, it's increased.
Just for a frame of reference.
Yeah,
For,
yeah.
the public too.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and that number is 4,600
moving.
that received at least one CMH service.
Okay.
Does that include
Qualify for
SUD
reporting.
population? Okay, so when I do my count, we take the SUD population out
Okay.
of the count that I report, because recipient rights for SUD services is different
Okay.
than recipient rights for mental health
So it wouldn't be
services.
that number, it would be that number less SUD.
Yes.
Thank you.
Brianna, I have a question for you. What stands out as far as distinction between a complaint and allegation? Because my understanding of complaint is basically a series of allegations. And looking at the definition, it's talking about an allegation has not been supported with evidence. But I mean, you can simply say the same thing about a complaint as well. It's just somebody making an assertion that a right has been violated. So when you have these numbers of complaints and allegations, 20 and 17, what's the distinction that one goes under a complaint category, one goes under allegation?
So a complaint would be categorized as, I received a written complaint. There's the complaint, right? That one complaint. That one complaint could have 5 allegations in it. It could have 1 allegation in it. So then your allegation number may be the same or more than your complaints. And so the allegation, so I received 20 paper complaints and 3 of them did not have any code protected rights, right? So your allegations could potentially be higher than the 20 complaints.
Any further?
Yeah.
Commissioner Reed?
I just have a
Maybe.
question. I'm curious, do you have any timeframes within which you're supposed to follow up on a complaint that comes in? And does that vary by severity of the complaint?
So the Michigan Mental Health Code, if you receive a complaint, whether it's in writing or whatever, you send an acknowledgement letter within 5 business days.
Okay.
Yep.
And if a complaint is severe, is it still the same time frame? Do you expedite more quickly? How do you approach that?
Like the acknowledgement letter would still be within 5 business days, but the investigation may be expedited.
Okay.
For example, the other day we got a call. I didn't get the call. Somebody else got the call and called me, secondhand and said, "Hey, I got a call. Somebody said this." And I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?"
Right.
And she says, "I have training." I said, "Okay, what are you doing Friday?" And she says, "I have training." She goes, "What are you doing right now?" And I was like, "Give me 5 minutes." And we literally reserved a car, hopped in the car and went and did an investigation. So yes, if it's severe, it's immediate.
Okay. Yep. And I just have to say, I agree with you on the additional need for staff here. I did licensing in foster care, so I handle complaints and investigations within that system, and it's really crazy to only have one person for this system. So, yes,
love
I
what I do.
can't believe the volume that you're dealing with.
Thank you.
And you're
I love what I
award-winning.
do though. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that helps.
Mhm.
And believe me, she'll never tell you she needs somebody else. One of the roles
true.
of the committee is to ensure we have the resources.
Mhm.
And that's my job to do that. Brianna's been doing it like this for a long time in a high level. So it's not like the recipient rights directors come to me and said, oh my goodness, it's me, the one that's been going. And even the system's like, well, what's wrong? We've been doing it perfectly
Mhm.
for so long. But that doesn't matter when you're looking at it objectively.
Absolutely.
And it's good also to have somebody who can come in and I can mentor them because it's not something that you learn quickly. It's a hard system. It's different than anything else. And, then in report writing, it is a special technique to get full compliance from the state of Michigan on your report writing. And so that's important to have somebody, reviewing and, hey, you need to go back and ask this question. I had that. And that was really, really helpful. And then, what if somebody gets sick? What if I get sick? We need somebody.
Mhm.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Just on item C, just know that I have reviewed and approve of all of the recipient rights policies that are here. It's information for you. But
Okay.
it's one of the things that we have to do internally. So I've reviewed and I've approved these and been through them. And they meet the standard that you see throughout the state with other systems, CMH systems. Just so when you're looking at that, some of them are several pages long. And you're like, I need a degree from MIT in rights to know like what I'm looking at. It's my job to understand it with the rights department. And I'm just letting the board, as your executive director, I've reviewed and approved all these policies.
So once we talk about them and we leave this meeting, as I told Dr. Bashirs, I said, I will change the date that we, reviewed them. And I will change, obviously, the name on the policies too. So these are just from last year. I have, every time we meet, I tell you about this really awesome pamphlet. It's called the Attachment B. It comes from the state of Michigan, and it is all things that our policies are required to have. And so there have been 0 changes to that attachment. These policies have no edits to them. They remain the same. I am told that the Attachment B is changing the next fiscal year. So probably, I don't know what the state goes by. I think it's October, but if not, it's January. And so maybe in the next 6 months, you will start to see some policies that will have some required modifications. But as of now, the Attachment B is the same. These policies were approved a year ago, when I had my triannual assessment. They met all of the MDHHS ORR requirements when I had my triannual assessment. So there are actually no modifications to this group of policies. Other than I'm asking for policy 1.27 to be moved to a different section. Because I don't think it's just strictly the accommodations policy is not just a recipient rights policy. It talks about limited English proficiency and other things that maybe customer service or compliance may want to review because of CARF requirements, et cetera. So that's the only reason I'm making the recommendation for it to be in a different section.
Right.
And as you're looking at them, you should know that next month I'll be recommending some structural changes to both, recommending some board subcommittees, but changes to the Recipient Rights Committee so that it can meet more frequently, not be the full board, and include members of the community to be on it that can then do a thorough review of policies and procedures to make sure we're capturing the people we serve's opinion of them.
Mhm.
And there's board oversight, which would then bring it back to this board once a year for the work of that subcommittee. So if you're sitting there like, okay, do I approve them? It says no motion. We really need a group of people that includes members of the public, providers, and the board to be part of the recipient rights committee oversight.
I
And so I'm
agree.
going to be looking at ways to do that more frequently in different venues to bring the full report back to the board as the statute suggests. This is my fault. 12 years ago, I said, let's make the CMH board the recipient rights committee. And it was actually Thomas Bird's wife that wanted it that way. It was Rita's fault. And I said, okay. But one of the drawbacks of that is, again, a board meeting or a rights committee once or twice a year means you can spend, like we are, 2 to 3 hours trying to get reacquainted to this again, and then you lose momentum. And then if you're a member of the public, you're like, so, okay, that's nice. So I'm gonna try to undo something I suggested over a decade ago to make sure that this particular committee and the oversight has a different body that's reporting to you that includes board members, community, providers. We can choose who's on it.
Mhm.
It just has to meet the Michigan Mental Health Code requirements, which we talked about in March
Yeah.
during our training of, like, I think it's a minimum of 6 people. Half of those have to be primary, secondary, and a third of that group has to be primary.
So you have
So,
members of our parent
Yep.
advisory group,
yep.
So
We have a previous recipient rights director who was in a different county who lives in Grand Haven. So maybe we can tap her because she'd be a great resource to have as part of our recipient rights advisory committee.
Absolutely.
So just so you know what's coming related to this committee, because right now it's like information only. It's not an adequate setting to have comprehensive dialogue.
Yeah.
So if I'm Beth and I'm new in the board, I go, okay, okay. Right?
Yeah.
So, or anybody else. So
And we
need-
don't
yeah.
have a motion for the
Right.
policies
Right.
because they're required by MDHHS ORR. And
Right.
if we don't have them, so like if we had a vote and, there was a quorum to not approve
Yeah, we'd be out of compliance.
the confidentiality policy, well, then we're not passing our triannual rights assessment because we need that policy. So,
Yeah, so I'm just acknowledging it's difficult when you have this before the board meeting and you come and then you this, and then it's like, all right, which hat on? So we'll be looking at that. Not that I love meetings, but different types of meetings with more people involved
yeah.
on key issues, I think is going to be helpful in this regard specifically.
It's an awful lot of information to digest and, yeah,
Yeah.
in a quarterly form.
Mhm.
Yeah, you see the origins of some of these policies to 1986.
Right.
Yeah, the original date. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
a lot to think through. Thank you for that. Right. Are we on item D then?
Is that the Holland Hospital semi-annual
This
report?
is the
or
Holland
that
Hospital
the
use of
discussion?
CMHOC Recipient Rights Advisory Committee. And the motion is to authorize Dr. Brashears and Ms. Cosby to issue a letter to Holland Hospital discontinuing the use of CMHOC's Recipients' Rights Committee, Advisory Committee, effective immediately.
Yeah, so let me explain this.
So we'll put motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion? Yes. And do I have support?
Support.
Now discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, so believe it or not, there's a loophole in the whole system that was specifically used when most CMHs were county departments. That was back in the day. And so hospitals, inpatient units that provide psychiatric services with Medicaid and general fund are subject to recipient rights investigations.
Mhm.
So in a lot of areas, you could, if you were the hospital, you're like, I have to have my own committee like this. And they said, well, you could use the CMH's committee as your committee, right? If you want to. And we're one of the few boards, if any, that still do that. Here's the issue with that. We don't control the investigations, the data, or the follow-up of recipient rights complaints that happen within Holland Hospital. The other major change that's happened is that I think this is the first year that they had to do a tri-annual assessment that all rights do. Would require that any policy and procedure that they have at Holland Hospital related to rights, you would have to approve. We have no jurisdiction to do anything with the investigations. There's nothing I can do in terms of the trend data that comes from that, which is included in the next item, which is kind of ironic. And so it's like, we receive the information and go, that's nice. What it would do is force Holland Hospital, like all other hospitals, like Pine Rest and others, to develop their own recipient rights committee and have their data viewed there. And this is a major change for them, but because the site visit system has changed, I'm seeing if I'm understanding this right. This is the first time where in the past, they would just come to us and we'd show them their data and they would not get like a full audit. Well, they just went through it. And I don't want to be subject to any findings they have for something I can't control. So that's why I'm asking this group to no longer serve as their advisory committee and send a letter to them saying, form your own, this is what we're going to do. This is what's done just about every other county in the state. Pine Rest has their own, other hospitals have their own. And they really need to have their own internal review of recipient rights. Because right now, they kind of do. They have good people doing it, but the person that does it has really no body to work with. So maybe we should have put item E before D, because D says, if you pass it, like, yeah, we're not going to do that. But that's what I'm trying
The
to
one
do.
last item,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
I don't know if you have questions on that.
Can we point them towards best practices,
Yeah,
or is that
yeah,
what they would
sure.
do?
They've
Yeah.
had years that benefit of Brianna. So there's,
Sure,
here's the whole thing.
model their organization.
Just do this. Yeah, we
Right.
can establish that. And of course, we won't move away until they're established. But we have to notify them, tell them they need to form their own committee, like every other psychiatric program in the state does in hospitals, and move away from having any oversight from a policy and procedure standpoint, because now we'd have to do procedures. And
Wow.
we don't get to write them. So.
And just some history, like even about their policies and procedures. Before the tri-annual assessments started in the LPHs. So this is the third year that tri-annual assessments have been going in the LPHs and licensed psychiatric hospitals. Holland Hospital is on that third year, right? So there's been 2 other years for other hospitals. So they're finishing up with the remainder of the hospital. So that was their first tri-annual. So they have the exact same standards that they're held to as I am. So, you know, they look at the policies, they review investigative reports, they, you know, make sure it has all the elements that are required, the committee composition, training, et cetera. And so for years before the tri-annual assessments began, I had to review their policies and procedures. And, you know, there have been some times where they're like, well, why do we have to do that? And I would say, well, send me your policy. I'll mark up edits according to the attachment B, because the licensed psychiatric hospitals also have an attachment B. I'll do all the work for you. You as a hospital, as an organization, can choose if you want to accept them or not. But it was against policy to send their policies outside of their organization. And so we had to rely on them to change their policies. And so I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't have any
No, I don't either.
control. Okay, right? And now the
But
state's
yeah.
in there and they actually have some leverage, right? To say, in order to continue to have a contract with us, all of these things have to be met, just like the CMHs. And they can hold them more accountable, where we really, like Dr. Bashir said, you know, I mean,
Yeah, I can't do.
rent a
anything.
committee is great, but I mean, what
Stop,
can
or
we
I'll say
do?
stop again. There's no.
Yeah. So, but I, you know, we'll help them. We'll,
Advisory, you were an advisory piece, but could be held accountable?
Mhm.
Or was there an accountability side to that as well?
No,
since we are functioning as their.
It's never been
RAC?
enforced, but yes.
Yeah, okay, so risk definitely too.
Yeah, and now it's a greater
CMHOC.
risk.
Yeah,
So like, no, absolutely.
yeah.
And I don't see, any of their recipient rights report substantiate or unsubstantiate any of them.
Yeah.
So I don't believe the CMH board or system here should be involved in it. We'll monitor and watch.
And they have a really, really amazing new recipient rights
Yes.
director that they hired. And I'm confident that she's organized, and I meet with her as much as we can, maybe once a month, every other month, and just do some mentoring just because she is so new, and just helping her work through, is this the right allegation that I'm thinking about? Yep, you're right on track. Okay, now who do I have to send this all to? And so, but I'm confident like she will thrive. She will do amazing things with this committee. So,
So you'll support her through the transition
Absolutely.
period.
yeah,
We want to make sure
Yeah.
it's a safe transition.
yeah, I really like her. She's
Good.
got a lot of potential. So,
Excellent.
yeah, they're very lucky to have her.
All right, and then next on the agenda is the Holland Hospital item that you'd.
Yes,
presented
and
to-
I can
yes.
email this to Chelsea. I just received it on a couple, like yesterday or the day before. But this is their summary, just like my
Recipient rights
summary.
Okay.
Yes.
Do that. That was actually a
Oh.
motion item.
Oh, sorry, we have to vote. I apologize. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get this until just now. So, okay, all those in favor of authorizing Dr. Shears and Ms. Cosby to issue a letter to Holland Hospital discontinuing the use of CMHOC's RRAC effective immediately, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to, it's the Holland Hospital report.
Semi-annual report. Yep.
Semi-annual report.
So Leah sent me this the other day, and so far it says that their rights office has received 28 complaints with 20 allegations. That's different because they received 8 no code out of jurisdiction. So 8 minus 28 equals the 20. 17 of the 20 were investigated, and they did 3 interventions. Interventions may be done when the allegation is quick to resolve, right? It doesn't require a lot of interviews and document reviews. It's just like, this isn't really a rights complaint, but it's the only thing that's coming to my head. I didn't like the food or something like that. I know that's more of a grievance. It's not a rights complaint, but that's something that you could quickly, resolve
Mhm.
versus doing a complete investigation. 0 of the complaints, 17 complaints, 0 were substantiated. So they have a 0% allegation substantiation percentage.
And then you're going to include that into our meeting, that report into the meeting minutes for review.
Yes.
What's out of jurisdiction from Holland Hospital?
It could be a complaint against a CMH, for example.
Okay.
Yep. So sometimes like somebody who has been inpatient at Holland Hospital and they submit a complaint to me about Holland Hospital's behavioral health unit.
That's.
I don't have jurisdiction, so Leah would get to do that investigation, and I would send a letter saying, I received your complaint. However, it's outside of my jurisdiction. Please call Leah. Here's her phone number. And then I would send it to Leah for her to follow up with the recipient.
Thank
So
you.
this is the point of the last motion. There's a 0 substantiation, the substantiation rate. So
Right.
0 of the complaints, they said met the criteria. That's kind of tough statistically. So I look at that report and I go, okay, I guess there was nothing to see there in any of these allegations, where our rate was what, 68% almost?
Yeah, I think it was.
Substantiating or agreeing, right? So I don't want our board to look at 0 and go, well, I guess not, what do we do about it? Nothing. So,
Brianna, how much, I'm not really sure how to phrase my question or what I have here. So if we have a CMH consumer that showed up in the Holland ER
Hmm.
in May and was treated with no dignity and respect, how much time does that family have time to go back then to Leah? Is that right? Would it be-
Actually, it depends.
Okay.
It depends. Because the emergency room is not a behavioral health treatment site. So therefore, recipient rights does not apply. Only on the inpatient behavioral health unit. But if we had a community mental health crisis worker at the unit doing a crisis evaluation for mental health services, recipient rights applies. So it just depends. I can't give you a specific answer to that. We would have to talk more later
Sure.
to decide, is it a patient relations issue at Holland Hospital, right? Like a grievance in their patient relations because it's a nurse that they interacted with in the emergency room? Or do we need to talk with the family because it was a CMHOC crisis worker? So it depends. It's complicated.
I understand. Maybe I'll talk to you.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think you should, actually, absolutely. All right.
What you're bringing up is a common occurrence. So we need to look at it.
Thank you.
That's why I'm a little bit concerned about releasing response, but we have not, I mean,
Yeah, they wouldn't be looking at that issue
Yeah.
anyways.
yeah.
The recipient rights apparatus is only with the contractual CMH code, like the
Right.
paying for the services. So the emergency room isn't part of that unless our staff's involved and we're the
Mhm.
ones, right? It'd be like going in a chiropractor's office with a consumer. So like we wouldn't have the jurisdiction. But long waits in emergency rooms and the dispositions of what happens to them if they show up with the behavioral crisis is something we have to look at and keep working with because it's a very common story that you could be in an ER for a couple of hours or more and not necessarily have the disposition or result that is needed. And so that's a tough thing we have to look at.
Mhm.
And I very much appreciate you bringing that up because it's a common thing that I hear.
Yeah. In this situation, they showed up in the air. It was a physical
Yeah.
situation that was happening to this young lady. And it turned into and escalated into a mental health severe crisis. So thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Are we finished then?
I think so.
Good. Okay, and moving on to old business, we have none. So we're up to our second round of public comments. Do we have any public comments? Yeah. State your name and jurisdiction where you vote, and you have 3 minutes.
Diversifying the makeup of that committee that's long needed. I'm trying to digest about kind of absolving recipient rights at Holland Hospital. I can kind of grasp, but I feel you said there's nothing to see here with zero substantiations when what's happening at Hawthorne and some of these other licensed psychiatric hospitals, giving that back to the state too. It's kind of losing a lot more accountability that the people don't know what questions to ask to, where do you complain? Who do you complain to? How do you get a crisis assessment in that amount of time? That it is too complicated and confusing, and to lose that layer of what should be accountability in the beginning, I wonder what's gonna happen more that we don't know about, or that we do know that's happening with no resolution for safety and health and
Thank you. Are there any further public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting for Recipient Rights Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need 5 minutes before we start with CMH? Let's take Go ahead and we'll come back, let's say 10:15 by that clock.
That was a good specification by that clock.
July 26, 2024. First on the agenda, or well, that was the first thing on the agenda, and next is our invocation. And Mr. Rockman, you have graciously agreed to provide the invocation today.
Heavenly Father, we ask for your guidance. Your ways are perfect. Guide us in our mission and vision. Truly, as you said, who does to the least of these does to you. Fill us with the Spirit to know your direction. As we face tough choices and hard situations, help us serve in a way that honors your holy name. Make whatever work we do be marked with excellence as we seek to make a difference. Let your will and promises always be a meditation of our hearts. Let us wear the whole armor of God, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the belt of truth, the shoes of peace, and the sword of the Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, moving on to item 3. Thank you for that. It's beautiful. Is the Community Mental Health of Ottawa County's mission and vision statement. The mission statement is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County partners with people with mental illness, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and substance use disorders, and the broader community to improve the lives and be a premier mental health agency in Michigan. The vision is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County strives to enhance quality of life for all residents. Moving on to item number 4, public comment. Your public comment. Good morning.
Good morning, Barbara Lee Van Horsen, City of Grand Haven and the Momentum Center. As you know, the Community Health Needs Assessment Study showed that mental health is the #1 concern in our county right now. The current level of divisiveness and polarization in our community is not helping our mental health, and anxiety is higher than ever. So I want to invite you all to be part of a community conversation on common values in uncommon times, really seeking to come together to understand what we share in common so that we can rehumanize each other and find ways to move together. It'll happen August 1st at 6 o'clock at the American Dunes Golf Club. And speakers include Deidre Johnston from Hope College, who will talk about our human proclivity to divide and categorize. Justin Roebuck will be there to talk about election integrity. Former prosecutor Ron France will talk about traditional Republican values. And Dr. Rob Davidson will talk about traditional Democratic values. And then we'll have an opportunity for table conversations, an opportunity to explore all of the ways in which our values overlap and how very not different from each other we are when we really start exploring our commonalities. So it is free. We do ask people to register. Again, we're part of the same community. How do we live together and find common ground? Also, with my time left, I want to invite you to the VU Cafe. We're planning a soft open in Grand Haven on Tuesday, if all goes well, and a grand opening August 13th with a ribbon cutting. The VU Cafe has already hired some of our members, some other people in the community who have disabilities, and they are continuing to hire. So if you know anybody looking for work, you can send them there. The people at US Cafe are approved through the LRE to provide job training and placement. And finally, mark your calendar for September 20th, put a save the date. That will be our homecoming in Holland. We've had such an amazing success with our member social community integrated event, the prom, in the spring in Grand Haven, that we're looking to replicate that in the fall in Holland. So our first homecoming with a heart will take place September 20th at the Midtown Center. Tickets will be $40. We continue to try to keep this accessible to anybody, and we will make tickets available for any of our members who can't buy a ticket themselves. So lots of good things happening, and I invite you all to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, yes, good morning.
Good morning. I recently discovered and checked on these microphones. They are omnidirectional. You don't have to point into the tip. As I stated at the Executive Search Committee, I think it would be premature to appoint Dr. Brashears as the permanent executive director. I am not making this about Dr. Brashears. In the end, I might believe he is the perfect fit. This is not about the choice. It's about the timing. He's making, I've heard him talk about a timetable of many reports and a lot of information he is bringing out and presenting to the public and to this board. And I think you should give him time to complete those reports before you decide who you're going to make the permanent head. That's.
Thank you. Are there any other further public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item is the consent items. Suggested motion is to approve the consent, the following items. A, the agenda for our July 26, 2024 CMHOC Board of Directors meeting. And B, minutes for June 28, 2024 CMHOC Board of Directors meeting. Do I have a motion?
Support.
Second.
And discussion, I would like to motion to amend the agenda to add an item. The motion is to add to number 7, actually make it item number 7, the appointment of the Executive Director for Community Mental Health, Ottawa County. Do I have a motion? Or I'm making the
Support.
motion. Do I have support? Perfect.
Support.
All right. Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go back to the original motion to approve the consent, the following items. The agenda for July 26, 2024 CMHOC Board meeting with the amended agenda. And then B, minutes for the June 28, 2024 CMHOC Board of Directors meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 6, that's the Executive Selection Committee. I was the chairperson. The Executive Selection Committee recommendations to appoint Dr. Michael Brashears as CMHOC Executive Director. So you want to have some discussion? Yes. Mr.
Madam
Byrd.
Chair, as a member of the committee that made this recommendation, I would like to say a couple of words since we've had comments from the public concerning timing. I disagree with the issue of timing. I think timing is imperative for our agency. We have a number of important tasks to achieve that involve how the agency operates. An interim director is, by his own admission, restricted in making major changes to the organization out of respect for the fact that he's the interim. I think the longer we wait, the longer we delay making improvements to our service delivery. And I would advocate that in the absence of any reason not to appoint Dr. Brashears today, as included further in the agenda, that we go ahead and proceed as we have planned in making an appointment of the right person at the right time.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I also sat on the executive committee, and I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Dr. Brashears for being willing to step into that this interim role for the time that it's been. I know that I continue to hope and pray that Lynn's doing well. It was a very unfortunate medical thing that happened to her, and we all were in kind of a place of craziness for a little bit of time. And so just hope that she's doing well. But I'm also very thankful that you were interested and able and willing to step into this position. With all that being said, I still believe that you are the right person for this position. I echo what Mr. Byrd has said. I think that your resume and your experiences, even from when you were the board or the ED years ago, I don't know how many years ago that was, but even since that time, you've added other experiences and responsibilities, and you even started your own nonprofit consulting, nonprofit leaders. And so I think that everything that you bring to this organization just makes you well suited for that position. And I am certain that I have no doubt that there will be stressful times and hard times, but I also know that there is so much joy in humbly serving people and the joyful experience that we get from that. And I'm grateful that you are willing to come alongside and serve the very vulnerable people of Ottawa County. So that would just be my thoughts since our last meeting.
Thank you. No, we held I'm trying to look for the exact date. It was an open meeting though of the Executive Selection Committee, a Transition Committee. And it was a unanimous decision to select Dr. Brashears to fulfill the role of CMHOC, Community Mental Health of Ottawa County's Executive Director role. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the added item, which the suggested motion is to appoint Dr. Michael Brashears for a term of 5 years as Executive Director of Community Mental Health, Ottawa County, to be memorialized in a written contract, which the chairperson of this body is authorized to sign. Do I have a motion? Is there support?
Support.
And do we have discussion, further discussion? Yes.
I guess
Commissioner
I just have a question. It sounds like it's for 5 years. So, just because I'm new to this, is that typical? Like, do we usually have a time frame placed on it?
I worked with Corporation Counsel and then also Dr. Brashears. And then we looked historically at other contracts as well for our executives. And this was a not abnormal timeframe.
Okay.
Mr. Byrd?
I guess of all the people on the board serving now, I probably have had the longest experience with Dr. Brashears since I was actively involved in interviewing him the last time he served as executive director, representing members of the community. As Dr. Brashears alluded, my wife was serving on the board at that time, and the board had recommended 2 finalists for the executive director position. That was what, 15 years ago, Michael? And we had an open house where full members of the board and members of the public could interview the 2 finalists. And it was an interesting dynamic. Of the 2 people who were recommended, everyone spent most of their time talking to Michael, and I really felt sorry for the other fellow. I don't even remember his name, but I went out of my way to go over and engage in conversation with him because he was standing by himself over in the corner, and Michael just completely overshadowed him in terms of his experience, his capabilities. But what struck me most at that point was Michael admitted that his previous experience in the CMH system had been serving people on the MI side. And when we specifically questioned him about his experience with the DD population, he was very frank in saying, you know, I know about them, but I don't know enough to know what's best for service. And I'm going to look to you folks, the parents and the board members, to teach me what I don't know. And to his credit, that was not a false promise. He dug in and learned what he didn't know and asked input from the community and from the parents who had a vested interest in their family members as to what would be the most appropriate means of improving the system. The system at that point had been in crisis. All the programs and services had been summarily shut down, and parents were in turmoil, wondering what was going to happen. Was there even going to be a system of services for their family members? And Michael dug in and turned the system around and made dramatic improvements in service delivery at that point. On a personal note, and I hope you'll forgive me for bringing this up, when Michael came to us then and started his service. A short time later, his wife very unexpectedly died shortly after childbirth. And Michael was faced with being a single parent of 3 children, including an infant child. They were still living in Lansing because he had not made arrangements to move them all here to Holland. And I think most people would have said, he would have been perfectly right in saying, you know, I can't do this. I'm going to go back to Lansing and take care of my family. But to his credit, he said, you know, I made a commitment to Ottawa County. There's a need for me to serve there. I'll trust God will give me the strength to handle my personal difficulties and make it work. And he did. And we are eternally grateful for that level of service. And I think it speaks kindly and positively towards his work ethic, his personal ethics, and his ability to serve the community with all of his heart. So the other thing is, having interviewed many people over the years in business, one of the interesting questions I've asked or been asked when I've been interviewed is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And to put you on the hot seat here this morning, would you be willing to share with us briefly what your strengths and weaknesses are?
Sure. You want a 3-hour meeting? Thank you for your remarks. I'm a little bit hooked up. What are my strengths? You know, it's hard to answer that question, because I'm always working on my ability to change and improve. But I find I'm a very good listener. I follow through with my commitments, and meeting my obligations, family, work, religion, faith, is the center of who I am. I like to use a collaborative model. I'll use consensus, but I also know that leadership requires decision-making. I feel one of the aspects of my strengths is I can make a decision, but if other variables come in or data, change my mind. So I've learned over the years not to be stubborn. I used to, like, oh no, this, So in terms of strengths, I think it's using collaboration, active listening, making decisions, but really trying to meet and understand the obligations that we have as a CMH board and all the commitments in my life. Weaknesses, I talk too much. There's never a short meeting where I'm in it, unfortunately. So sometimes in my attempt to listen and communicate, I can over-communicate. Sometimes that can be a little overwhelming to some people. Sometimes it can come off as pompous at times, which is not my intent. Oh, he just think he knows everything. He keeps saying it, right? But so one of my weaknesses is over-communication at times, and not having necessarily the best work-life balance. I put everything into my family, my job, sometimes at the neglect of my own personal health or well-being. So it's a weakness I'm aware of. Sometimes I can get passionate, very passionate when I'm talking or addressing an issue, and that sometimes can get intimidating for people too. So it's something I watch out for. I have to be aware. My girls tell me this all the time. Dad, it's you telling me this. And you say it so passionately, I don't know if, like, do I get to disagree? So sometimes my passions for things doesn't necessarily allow for people to feel comfortable in providing their opinion. So it's something I work on a lot. So I guess off the top of my head, not thinking I'd be asked that, those were kind of raised to the attention, that the way to answer it. Another one of my strengths is I don't know, I'll find out. And I'll keep looking and keep looking and keep looking. I don't like not knowing certain things, so that can be a weakness too. Any strength you turn the other side of the coin can be a weakness, but I've had to learn a lot since the last time I was here about making sure we're aligned. And I had the opportunity to work directly in the residential center system and be a provider of care the last 10 or 11 years, and understand what it's like on a Friday night for a family member with a kid that's acting out. What can you actually do? or in a group home setting, understanding the variables associated with providing care. And it's really been beneficial to me to be outside of the system, working alongside of it for the last 11 years as a provider, consultant, and consumer care sometimes. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Mr. Ekman.
May I add another strength on a personal level? I want to thank you for your ability to the comfort and uplift. Sharing with me your own life experience has been very helpful in dealing with my own. I thank you.
Oh, Ms. Wenzel.
I just wanted to add that, my interaction with you, you were the first person to ever call me, contact me, get to know me, ask all sorts of questions. And you genuinely listened and you wanted to know. It wasn't just a by rote thing. You also are, I feel like you're very inclusive. You want us all to change and improve, not just you, but for all of us. You want training, so everybody's on the same page, be it Beth and I who are newer, or people that, Mr. Bird, who's been here a long time. It was so encouraging to me. It's the first time since I've been here that happened, and it just really spoke volumes about your character and personality.
Well, I met you at the first millage steering committee that I attended, I think in place of Mr. Rockman. He had a previous engagement. And I had heard a lot of things about you from consumers and then secondary consumers, your family members. And I have to say, I mean, the self-awareness you just demonstrated has come across right from the very beginning. And if I had to give you one word, I would say kind. You are incredibly kind. And that gives me great hope for CMHOC in the future to have somebody who is leading with that kind of kindness in your heart. I think it's the foundation of who you are. And I'm very appreciative that you were interested in this role. Ms. Rhodey.
Yep, and I would just add that I really appreciate your analytical skills and your over communication, because it's very helpful to us to first be able to trust your analysis, but also that you're so good at communicating it so that we can understand things better. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to appoint Dr. Michael Brashears for a term of 5 years as Executive Director for Community Mental Health of Ottawa County to be memorialized in a written contract, which the chairperson is authorized to sign. We already have the motion on the floor, so all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Welcome aboard, Executive Director Brashears. And we'll take the interim off at item 8 now and say that we are on to our Executive Director's report with Dr. Michael Brashears.
Thank you, and appreciate the ability to serve. It was touching the comments, so I'm still a little kind of.
Tissues for your.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah, well, right.
We don't have that in our supplies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
there's some.
You should have a copy, if you don't, of kind of a written outline of my director's report. If you don't, we'll post it on the packet. I'll go through it. I use this as an outline. It's not all the things I talk about, but I think it's important to have it. So if you're in the public, this will be included in our board packet that you can download. Or if you'd like a copy of it, and I have an extra one here, I'll give it to you on the way out. And we'll make it available. Just so the board knows, before the board meeting, I have a process where I sit in the office early. And I finalize this, and then I send it out to all the staff. So, sorry, I'm still. So here are some of the issues that were addressing. At the state level, as you know, we had,
Do you want a moment?
no, I'm good, thank you.
You're good, okay.
Yeah, push through it. I'm from Massachusetts. We know how to deal. We still have the issue of conflict-free case management and access and planning. Via email, part of my over communication, I sent you out the latest communication yesterday from the Board Association saying that the state is considering dropping the date of implementation and how they're going to handle this. You know, my position on this issue is we support conflict-free access and planning first. And I'm definitely opposed to the way that the state is trying to roll out conflict-free access and planning. However, I'm not going to recommend that our board passed a resolution opposed to it, like I had once before, and I had Alan Bolter from the Board Association to come in, because I'm still not confident that all the variables to ensure conflict-free and to assure, especially our folks on self-determination arrangements and other stuff, that it's been thought through thoroughly. So what I mean by that is I would not want us to pass a resolution that might inadvertently send a message to families or individuals in supports coordination and self-determination models that somehow we're opposed to that conflict-free approach. And I'm not sure we're going to have to, because I think the state is re-examining their position and how they roll this out. So it's still an issue. I'll keep you apprised. I mean, the only thing that I worry about is on September 30th, they say to me and the deputy director, here's what you're going to do for conflict-free. We've evaluated our system. I think we have a lot of barriers in place that support conflict-free. We're going to continually look at it. But it's an issue of follow-up because last time we even brought the Board Association guy, Alan, here. And I just don't think it is necessary at this point for us to pass our own resolution. I think we already have enough. I don't think at the state they're going to go, oh, Otto would put theirs in, therefore change everything. I want to actually get more aligned to the family and the community and our staff to ensure that we're doing conflict-free regardless of what the state is saying, how they want to roll it out. So my obligation is to ensure internally at CMH, I believe we're doing it in room for improvement, to make sure there's not a conflict of interest in who's assessing you and what service that you get. So we'll make that an internal performance improvement project to help inform whatever regulation the state throws at us. And so that's how I'm going to deal with that at the local level first. I haven't met with enough people yet that have special arrangements through self-determination to know what their real opinion is. And it's one of those things, the data points I haven't got yet. So I need to do that, parent advisory committee and the public on that issue. In terms of the regional entity, we are part of a regional entity where we're the members of a 5-county board. It's what's called a PIHP, which is a technical term in the Medicaid language. And it's the organization that manages the Medicaid dollars, policies, and procedures in partnership with us, but they're a level above us. I've been looking at the operation agreement that we have between CMHSP, and please realize that all of these agreements we have with, say, Medicaid or State General Fund is with the CMHSP board and not the County of Ottawa. So we're actually responsible as a body, me in conjunction with you and the staff, to manage and run the Medicaid contract, which our biggest partner is the Lakeshore Regional Entity. And we have member board, we have up to 3 board members on that board to help us do that. We have a vacancy. So next month I'll be recommending and seeing who's interested. I've been trying to twist the arm of one board member already over here, but we'll see. To join the regional entity board, and we have Sarah Hogan from Benjamin's Hope, who also is on the LRA board in the audience today. As Sarah will tell you, we're doing a deep dive into the operating agreement, the bylaws, and the strategic plan. I'm going to have a summary of my examination of that board and our contracts to present my next director's report. The question is, what are we obligated to do for Medicaid services? How does the funding work? And how does the public and the board know? So I'm looking at these strategic documents to ensure that we're clear on our obligations contractually and ethically to our Medicaid services that we provide. So it's 88% roughly of our budget that's controlled by another board. And the money comes from the federal government to the state, to the LRE board, to us. So if you're a consumer of care, how many bites of the apple does one take before the actual money gets to the folks? A lot. It's my job to ensure that citizens and consumers of Ottawa County get the services they deserve, regardless of how many levels of bureaucracy we have. But I'm not sure that we as a board are fully educated on the implications at each level, how the state deals with the money coming from them through the waiver programs, how the state then decides how much money each region gets in Medicaid, and then how the region itself decides how the CMHs get a pie of that. You need a degree from MIT to follow it. We need to simplify it, make the public understand it, the board be educated on it, and some of you are already, to know how much of our budget is actually controlled outside of here and what our role is. So that's why I'm doing what I call a foundational source review of the regional entity documents, policies, bylaws, and you'll see later in my report, so that I can offer an education session to the public and the board as a work session on that very subject. So please look, if you're in the public, for those dates. We'll publish, you'll see later in my report what I have in mind. But it's just to remind the CMH board, now that I have a 5-year obligation to work with you, that this board is extremely important. It is the actual legal entity by statute that must manage all of the CMH specific funding sources. Regardless if you're a county department, regardless if you're a standalone authority, this is where it's at. And I want to make sure that we have the tools to understand it so that when you're reading board packets, you don't have to sit there and go, what in the hell does this mean every single page? Because that's what I'm doing, and I got 30 years of experience. So that's why I'm doing a review at that level. And I'll be asking Sarah, I haven't told her yet, our LRE board member, and Rich Canton is our other LRE board member, and they're newly appointed, once we appoint one, to join in with me with an examination of the state of the union of the Lakeshore Regional Entity and what it means to us. So more to come on that. Does that make sense?
Dr. Brashear, it's just
Yeah.
a question. It's just a random one that I'm just thinking as I look at this. I've been on the board for just over a year. How long have we had a vacant seat? Because this is the first time I'm ever hearing about a vacant LRA
Several
seat.
months. I'm trying to figure exactly when, but several months.
Okay,
Yeah.
I never heard of that. I don't know
Yeah.
if you guys have, but I hadn't.
We can have up to 3 members. We don't have to have 3 members.
Okay,
So I think that's, there was a lot of transition going on here at CMH and at the region.
all right.
But we were at the LRE board meeting the other day, and Sarah made a motion that the vacant board position actually be assigned to a committee. So yeah, we need to have that filled.
Okay.
And the way the process works for the LRE board is a little different than the process for here. I have to make a recommendation to the board. The board then, our board, not the county commission board,
Sure.
then appoints a member of our board or a community member to that position. And right now, we do not have any CMHOC board members on that board, which I think is absolutely pivotal. At least one of those 3 be one of you.
Absolutely.
And yes,
Mr. Bird.
For the board members who aren't aware of it, Richard Canton served on the CMH board for probably a full 12-year
Yes.
term. And certainly is knowledgeable of our organization, but he is not currently a board member. You're right.
right. And he's willing, his term is up in August. He's willing to serve again. He is a dedicated public servant that represents us well. But one of the things is we haven't necessarily had a good opportunity for our LRE board members to submit a report to me, to report to you. So they can feel all alone as board members. And so Lynn did a good job working with them and communicating with them. And I will continue that, but I want to make sure that there's a formal opportunity for our LRE board members if they ever wanted to address us or be part of a group, to be part of that, because they're serving the citizens of Ottawa County with millions of dollars. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, Lynn did a good job communicating with them, keeping them up to date. I'm going to formalize the process a little bit more and have active reports. And Lynn always reported on LRE issues. It was part of her method that I have adopted of like state, regional, and local issues in her, the report. But we need to fill that by the end of August. I don't feel comfortable not having full representation on that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Michael, may I interject a second? Could you add another item to the issues about the LRE that you're investigating? I'd like to have your candid opinion as to what value the LRE provides to us, other than simply writing checks and passing money through. We're talking $20 million a year budget for the LRE. And as a little background, you were around when the LREs were established, and the argument given by DHS at the time, which was the agency over us, was, well, we have 35 individual PIHP contracts around the state that we have to administer, and we can't possibly handle that and manage that. So we want to set up 10 regions, so we only have 10 PIHP contracts. Well, at that time, our region had a $2 million budget. And if you extrapolated from what we knew, because you could never get real numbers, it was costing the state $50 million a year to set up this intermediate level of administration. And the way it was sold to the legislature was, oh, well, we're going to do this, but it's going to pay for itself because it's going to provide services to the individual CMHSPs that will more than cover the cost of establishing this administrative level. Well, we're now $20 million in our LRE. And across the state, that has to be hundreds of millions of dollars in money that's siphoned out of our precious Medicaid money coming to the state. So my question is, are we getting our money's worth from the LRE?
Sure.
What are they doing for us that is of value?
So within the first 10 minutes of my new position, you're going to have me given a candid opinion about the organization that gives us all of our money. Sure, I'll do that. So yes, I will, because there is a SWOT analysis opportunity. What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of being part of a regional entity like the Lakeshore Regional Entity? And we should do due diligence. And I'm in the first stage of that right now as we speak, doing a foundational document review of the bylaws, the strategic plan, policies and procedures, and the impact to our county. So yes, that will be a candid opinion, is what you'll get in every report that I ever write. And that's how I operate, and that's how I'll continue. I think we're good partners with the regional entity, but it is a layer of bureaucracy that other states do not have. Out of the 50 states, there's only maybe 15 states that have a similar model. So yeah, there are challenges. And be happy to add that. One of the other things I've been doing is completing, as part of the first 90 days, my own analysis of internal and external operations. I provide this every executive report. Where I'm at in the process is, I got information from CMH leadership. I've got information from the board. I've got information on strengths and weaknesses from the opinions of employees. I've had 60 responses on that. I am getting information from the regional entity about how they view us in the same way: strength, opportunities, threats, those types of things. And then the final leg will be opening up a general opinion for the general public. When you think of CMH, however you think of CMH, whatever you know, what do you think the strengths, weaknesses are? when you really send that type of analysis out for the public, I always leave out the opportunities and threats and change those two part of the SWOT analysis to what do you think is needed? Because I get strengths, what do I like? I think I like about the system I know. What are the weaknesses of CMH? Well, as I understand it, here's what I think the weaknesses are. And then what do you think we need? Which mirrors some of the stuff we do in an annual assessment or needs assessment anyways. But that part of it will all be complete, and then I'll be able to give a report in August about the initial opinions of leadership, the board, the region, the public on our strengths and weaknesses as people understand it. It will then allow us to develop strategic planning goals and objectives as a board. So that is ongoing, and I list that there. I will tell you the 60 employees that responded to my questions. It was a confidential ask. They didn't have to disclose who they were. And boy, once I reminded folks of that, the numbers went way up. It went from like 15 responses to 60, and that's about almost half of our, a little bit less than half of our group. Which if you do any type of asking a question and you get more than say 15 or 20% return rate, then to me, it's a valid sampling. So that is part of the then interim director's analysis process. And so I'll have that concluded to that. And I will tell you the employees were very forthcoming. Lot of strengths, weaknesses made sense, and opportunities and threats. The morale was listed as much higher than I had thought, but you'll have the full report coming up. So this is just part of my own internal thing that I did. Had nothing to do with any other obligation related to analysis. And so you'll have those results in August. Sorry, where am I? Okay. Okay, I had the honor of meeting with some of our specialized residential providers last Monday. It's the second meeting I've had. It's part of, as you remember, one of my first things, I think I was 3 days on the job as an interim. I declared that our residential services rate setting methodology, or how we do it, needs to be looked at immediately. And under the interim director decision-making principles at the time I was using, I declared it an emergency and one that I couldn't wait until the next director, whoever else was appointed. So I've had 2 meetings with that group, and the goal is, are we paying enough to our residential providers that covers the basic cost of care? The answer, no. Just telling you straight up. Are we providing enough to ensure the service is provided? Yes. Are our contractors doing really well and maintaining all of our standards? Yes, in spite of a basic rate that in most cases, not all, most cases, isn't covering even the basic cost of direct care workers to provide the service. So the second meeting I had with the residential provider group, and I'll tell you more about them in a moment, was eye-opening. I proposed, I'm kind of laughing because it's almost silly when I think of it in retrospect, a very basic model of how we could get to a basic kind of rate that we offer to providers. Well, I was missing about 7 or 8, and Krista's in the audience smiling, variables that we haven't really paid attention to, like, are we providing enough resources to deal with the clinical services oversight and coordination? If someone's in a specialized group home, their staff are doing a lot of the coordinating and overseeing of clinical linking because they have to do it at the local level. That's not built in. Overtime for direct care workers. We have providers that have 30 to 40% overtime a pay period because of the shortage of workers. So that's not built in yet. Transportation costs. We're expecting consumers to be able to get to medical appointments and community inclusion activities without any thought of how much does that cost to provide the transportation. It's been an issue for years, for probably decades. Who pays for transportation? The health department to medical appointments, us for all these other things. The answer is, I don't care anymore. If we're going to have a community inclusion benefit, get folks in the community, we have to make sure there's enough resources to actually get them there. So that was not in the equation. We haven't necessarily been able to address administrative burden related to audits, documentation standards, training, and compliance. We are a heavy compliance-focused bureaucracy that requires home providers, keeping people at home and families, AFCs of any type, to have to comply with hundreds of regulations. And we actually don't, in the rate we give providers, really acknowledge that and validate it in a real way. We don't even say like 10% admin or 15. So we have to look at that. And then we have to deal with the expectations related to home and community-based standards, which I'll be doing a presentation on in a couple of months to the public. What are they? How does that influence your loved one? And so on and so forth. You put all those together, and we've only been really addressing half of the equation. So if you're a board, you're like, good God, Dr. Brashears, what you're really telling me is we need double the rate. Not necessarily saying that. What we have to do is to come up with guidelines and principles and a basic formula to at least address these issues, and then apply it to each individual situation and figure out how we get it. Right now, we have ranges for our specialized residential programs that go from $70 a day to $1,400 a day. And everything in between. Yeah, I said it in public. That's the range. How did we get there? History and trying to meet individual needs and trying to be very good at what we do. What is needed now? Some structure around it and some feasibility studies of how we maintain it. So how we got to that rate structure wasn't mismanagement. It was an honest attempt to, through the years, meet the individual needs of that provider and that consumer in a person-centered planning model. So you might have a person in one home that has X amount per day and another that has another amount per day. And right now, it's not clear to me the logic model besides really being person-centered and doing that. Well, fiscally, that's hard to maintain, and our residential budget's close to 1/3 of our overall budget. So we have to look at it. Okay, and so I'm continually looking at it. I've been very happy with the level of participation on providers. But I'm telling you, it's just the beginning. I had 2 of the board members here at the meeting online, and I'm sure, I know, Beth, you might have been thinking, how does this pertain to families that might have loved ones at home and how we pay for services? That's next. How do we deal with non-licensed adult foster care homes creating special arrangements? That's after that. So this is a beginning of looking at how we deliver personal care and community living supports in any type of setting, in the home to keep people there, in self-D arrangements, in other arrangements, and then licensed adult foster care. And it requires a comprehensive review and strategy to deal with it, because you can easily have the budget go from this to that if you're not careful. And so when I'm talking about specialized residential and group homes, if you're the public and you have someone at home and you're like, well, how much are we getting paid to have CLS workers come in? That's next. So don't think we're just focusing on providers of adult foster care. That's phase 1 because they're the biggest group. Am I making logical sense about what I'm doing and where I'm going? Okay. The next thing I'm going to look at is youth to adult transition. What are we doing as a system? We're probably doing lots of good things, but I want to look at it. You're a youth and you're in one part of CMH, and all of a sudden you turn 18. What happens? How do families know it? Is there a service drop-off cliff or whatever, or do you get more services, right? What happens if you're in family services and you get to adult services at any level? We have policies and procedures related to that. We have systems in place, but I want to take a look at it. Because one of the things I want to ask us as a system is, are we providing services, say to the 18 or 26-year-old group that have autism or IDD, in addition to what the school system is? We're supposed to be the payer of last resort, but it doesn't take away our obligation to provide services for people that are either a youth or in this other other 18 to 26 group, if we have other services that they're eligible for. Sometimes we can say the ISD is doing it, come to us when they're 18. That's not the law. So I want to make sure and ensure that, and I'm not saying we're not, I want to look at it to ensure that we're offering the full service array for 18 to 26, if they're involved with ISD, or youth to adult transitions. The youth to adult transition requirement, informing families and what happens next, is actually not only a Medicaid requirement, it's in the mental health code as one of the only things we have to do with general fund dollars, the state general fund dollars. We have to have a youth to adult transition process. So families know, hey, my kid's 16, when they're 18, what changes in their service array? I'm not saying we're not doing it well, but I want to make sure I understand that particular thing. Why? It's a core obligation. That's why. So that's why it showed up of many things in my report to look at. And again, we may be doing a great job. We may not be. We'll find out. And then the last thing is I'm going to be scheduling, I pick Fridays, we can pick a different day, a series of board and community education sessions in August and in September. Right now, I'm slating them from 12 to 1, right in the middle of the day. Location to be determined and subject to date change if people don't like the day. But I want to offer an hour or more each week for the next several weeks of going through certain types of funding sources and our obligation to that. If people can't make it, we'll find a way to record it or get the information out. It'll be an ongoing series that repeats all the time. So it'd be like Medicaid services and funding. What's the contract? What are we obligated to? State and local general fund dollars. What are we contracted to do? What are we obligated to do? CCBHC. What is it? What are we contracted to do? It's a great program, but it's complicated. How's the funding work? Millage. We have it. How do we decide to use it? What do we use it for? Grants. We have like tons of grants. I met with the grants folks, and Anna's been leading that up with her staff, and boy, was I holy Toledo. Every grant I liked, but I want to ask the question with grants. Are we obligated to it? Does it extend out in a way that may not meet the vision and mission of CMH? How do we do that? Develop kind of a metric in looking at that. Grant funding has been absolutely imperative in helping us deal with massive cuts in the Medicaid system, especially in 2016, 2017, when we were here. So we've had to do that to augment certain things, but now you have to continuously evaluate the utility of the grant. And if that extends the vision and mission of what we do to a way that we're not comfortable with. So we'll have an internal process for that, but then we also want to have a dialogue with the board. So look for those. The last thing, and I'm sorry, it's pretty lengthy. The Millage Steering Committee. It was originally asked by the board to have the executive director to have a steering committee. It had 2 members here in the community to look at millage funding, how we're spending it, evaluate. I'm going to be recommending structural changes to that in August as part of my formal evaluation that basically, in short, makes the entire board part of a millage discussion. Because here's what was happening. We had 2 people appointed, and then some of you would show up anyways. And when you did that, I was going, uh-oh, is this a quorum of the board? Should it be a public meeting now? Right? So I was worried, and I wasn't in this role then. I was actually just a member, a community member going, okay, there's 4 or more. And I worry about the Public Meetings Act and the way that we currently have that structured, even though there was no decisions made by the board members there to do A, B, and C or motions. It's that thing where it started to feel like a subcommittee of the CMH board and not necessarily what it was intended to do. And quite frankly, the recommendations would come up, you as the board could just go like this anyway. So it didn't matter. We could have recommendations and say Steve's sitting on it and he may say, well, I know what we said here, but as a board member, no or yes, right? And so what I'm going to be recommending is that we restructure that committee, that it really is a committee that the executive director and staff run that reports to the full board. And I've outlined some role and functions in my document that I'd like you to review over the next several weeks, and I'll give opportunity for feedback. I want to be able to make sure that we have a millage committee or millage fund strategic plan, principles and procedures of who is eligible and what types of things that will fund with the millage. If we're going to fund a certain percentage, the millage is going to pay for a certain percentage of grants, we should have a cap of how much that is so that we don't necessarily use half the millage for like one thing. I'm going to be proposing like things like the millage should be used, a percentage of it, of new and innovative projects that last for 2 years. Another percentage to look for ongoing programs that only millage funding can support, like social rec and the like. Another percentage to help with special community projects. But I want to provide caps, limits that we can choose that gets board approval, the full board, before they're implemented. We have a statutory and financial obligation to manage that money a little tighter. Boy, have we done a good job using it, right? We really have. And thank God we have it. If we didn't have the millage, I'm telling you right now, the CMHOC's ability to provide cares and integrate in the community would be significantly hampered. So I want to be able to demonstrate outcomes and present it to the full board. Watch the, Stephen says this all the time, cost benefit analysis of it, because my staff knows all the good it's doing. They can tell you. I haven't sat in a meeting yet going, wow. But I don't think necessarily the public or the full board knows. So we're going to change that. So what my ask is for you to review some of these things. I'll be sending out more information to the board. And then in August, I'll come up with some recommendations of how we're doing that, because we have to make some decisions about millage stuff pretty quickly. And we have some providers, actually, believe it or not, that have been providing outpatient care without millage funds, where we used to have a contract last year. And that was one of the reasons why Lynn came to the board several months, like right before she left, and said, we have millage surplus. I'd like to use it for this particular reason, which a lot of it was for the expansion and continued funding of mental health treatment in the community. So I've been able to meet with those providers, understand the needs, and that will be part of the recommendations. But I want the full board to have the ability, just like any other funding source. What's the number? What are we obligated and what have we chose to do? How we manage it, so that you're not just dependent on a couple of you to be sitting in like a sub work group, then to present the information back to the full board. And 4 or 5 of you might go, well, that's nice, but no. So I'm trying to avoid that. The model will include ways to include other community partners and of identifying the needs we have. We have an annual needs assessment that happens, but we need to make it more robust when it comes to the millage. There needs to be some special targeted things that we're doing that the board understands why we're doing it and the expected outcomes. And we need to do an outcome analysis every year on the effectiveness of millage funds. We have some of that now, but I want to change it, make it a little bit more robust. So the citizen can say, why did I vote for this? This equated into 2,000 people getting this, or this equated in the reduction of inpatient psychiatric crisis events by this, and prove it. So if I'm a citizen, I go, wow, that social rec program or that thing saved us potentially this much in psychiatric hospitalization and this much in terms of additional services that might not be needed if these other programs weren't there. You're owed that level of analysis so that you can make an educated decision on the appropriate use of millage. So we're just going to tighten it up and build on the good work that's already been done. So that's why I included that in my director's report, to give you some general ideas of what I might come back with. And I encourage you to review them, reach out, and I can answer any questions related to that. Does it make sense what I'm saying? Because I said it off a lot, that talking a lot thing.
I just want to make a statement.
Yep.
True. Thank you so much for this, because it's like this community was very generous, very compassionate, and our millage started back in 2016. Finances are tight for people right now. And in 2026, we are going to in 2026, this will be up for a vote again. And the voters need to see the value of the millage, mental health millage as we go forward. And I think these steps will help secure that for our voters. So I really appreciate your work effort.
That concludes my report.
Thank you for addressing these issues, and I'm looking forward to, the further progress and reports to us.
Thank you for paying special attention to the 18 to 26. That's been my target for a long time. And one of the reasons I want to get onto this board is because that's a passion of mine. So thank you.
All right. Moving on, no old business, so we'll go to new business. And discussion about CMH board meetings, dates and times. And board member Clengens asked if we could maybe look at different days and times for this meeting to be held. And so I think it's just to be a discussion item at this moment. Any recommendations may be taken in too?
Oh, God, no. It was just, we made the shift for a specific reason, and we have had a number of times where we've tried to reschedule kind of like around when we've tried to land here, and it's a tough time for a lot of people, it seems. So it seemed like an appropriate time to bring up that, Fridays is a weird day for a lot of us, and the initial impetus for why we switched to this day isn't necessarily valid anymore.
Further discussion?
What day? Like,
You can bring up a day, Robin. So if there's a day
Like,
that works better.
other than Friday is what I was.
Yeah, Tuesdays I know are tough for the commissioners. Please. Oh, wonderful.
This room, just so maybe this will help you guys
Mhm.
land on a better day. Every Monday, all day works. First, second, and fourth Wednesday, all day, so that would leave out the third Wednesday, every Thursday and every Friday. Like you said, Tuesdays are a little complicated,
Mhm.
so I'm not sure how it would work out, but
I know, I have, yeah.
Maybe not.
Would you be willing, Chelsea, to send that that assessment out to the board members? And then maybe what we could do, and Dr. Bashir, I see your name after this and I took it over, but no.
Yeah.
Like I said, I had the conversation with Mr. Clench.
Fridays is
Yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
Horrible.
Oh.
So, for many reasons so like if there was a desire to move it,
Sure.
I would definitely support that. Just figuring out when that is.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So maybe what we do is send out the
Yeah.
opportunities there and compare our calendars.
The other thing to pay a little bit of attention to is public access to our meetings. So if we go to 8 AM on whatever day,
right.
you're not going to have a lot of people showing up.
Right.
Good point.
So
Yeah,
I think 9 o'clock is reasonable, or 10 o'clock, or whatever. We want people to feel like they can get here.
right. No,
So-
that's a very good point.
We can work on something and bring it back. Like get
Perfect.
some
Yeah,
feedback.
and
if you have
maybe we can give you
on that.
feedback, and once we receive that kind of,
Like-
we can compare it to
Yeah.
our calendars and see what.
Yeah.
I mean,
know
there's
it's
always a
tough, but-
problem with the day or time, but I will tell you for my staff, like for selfish reasons, Friday is a tough day for us.
Okay,
Um,
you did, and
That
it,
helps.
yeah.
Yeah.
oh, great.
Wonderful. All right. So next on the agenda is the July 2024 service contracts. And that's attachment A with Bill Phelps. The suggested motion is to approve the July 2024 service contracts as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
And time for discussion. It's not good afternoon yet, Bill, but we're getting there. Good morning.
Can't hear him.
Your, your microphone, yeah, I know. Perfect,
Thank you.
thanks.
Right. Okay. The first contract is with Samaritas, a contract amendment. And what we'd like to do here is utilize the expertise of a staff person at Samaritas to provide a training called screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. And this is evidence-based. It's approved by SAMHSA. It's an evidence-based practice to help clinicians glean kind of information from folks when they're doing the assessment of the brief screening on substance abuse issues. And we're really blessed with a top-notch clinician that works at Samaritas, Anthony Muller, and we like to use him. So the plan is to offer this training on a quarterly basis to our staff. And that's the first one. The second one is with the foster care home, Delight Care. And what we're doing here is we're trying to build capacity. So we received a phone call from this agency, this organization saying, hey, we're opening up this home. We got a provisional license from the state. And so we want to get into a situation where if our ombuds person or housing person needs to place somebody, especially in an emergent situation, we're not in a situation where we have to be looking for a new place and trying to get the contract together real quick and stuff like that. So that's the purpose of this one. It has been approved by the LRE for their home and community-based waiver. It has a provisional approval there. So that one's all good to go. And those are our two.
Bill, I'm going to add a couple things if you're okay. When you look at how we're doing the face sheets for the contracts and we get like Delight Care, if you get this in your email and you read it, you say, are we going to spend $250,000 to $500,000 on this one placement? The answer is maybe, right? So what we're going to have to do in the future is get better at, if we know of identified person and an identified rate that's going to be in there, we can give you the estimated annualized cost of that service. This is directly linked to this initiative I'm doing with homes, right? Like, well, what the rate should be. So right now, this is like a placeholder of the potential range that we have there. But we're going to get better and better at saying, actually, this is a contract for this home, for one consumer or what a group of consumers. This is the daily rate. Here's the annualized rate. So you're not looking at ranges, and we can actually do a better job of counting the actual expenditures. Because right now we're always doing catch up. We think it could be this. And we then in the financial system, we're looking at actuals and reporting that to you. And you'd be like, good God, am I approving a $500,000 contract with nobody in it? So this particular contract is to build capacity for residential services. My belief is that we have to look at developing more in Ottawa County. There's a lot of Kent County stuff going up, but not a lot of Ottawa County because of all of the variables associated to housing for everybody. But it is part of a strategic plan to look at resources in Ottawa first. So I'm stepping in here because I send this poor guy up here every board meeting to say, here's this thing, and there's the big sticker shock at the bottom, and you're going, am I approving $500,000 for a thing that's not there yet? It's just the range. But I'm going to adjust how we do these to get close to an accurate estimate. One, you can see the disparity in rates and how we're dealing with that. And B, you know what you're actually approving. So I add that as a lot of interjection because we're learning to work together, me as a team and you as a board and all of us. And we're getting closer and closer to the right information on this, but I'm not happy with just having the range.
Go ahead.
So when you do that, will you still give yourself flexibility though? Because a lot of times, needs increase, and I would hate for you to have to come back for approval
Right.
for that. So
Yeah, and that was kind of the one thinking there. So, and we'll have to go over the rules of thresholds of approvals and what comes back to the board. And I'm going to try to do that by the development of a finance subcommittee of this board. So we can really get into what are we really authorizing and how do you have that flexibility so that we don't have to bring things back for just small amendments. You know, what's the threshold of amendments? Because as the chief operating officer of the mental health code of the Medicaid funds for you, I should have the ability to manage it without any change in a contract having to come back to you. You're gonna have like, so what are those thresholds? How we want to manage that, and what are my obligations to report it all have to be flushed out.
Okay. So in capacity, I really like the idea of building capacity. Do we know like total capacity that we have per the contracts that we're engaged in right now?
Like all of it?
Yeah, so we
I
have
don't-
2,600 members or of CMH.
Yeah.
People receiving services. I'm just,
I don't know that
Curious.
number, but I can get it. It's like what,
Okay.
like if today, if 20 people needed residential services, are there spots?
right, but
Right.
having, yeah, capacity built in
Right.
allows us to react emergently in,
Yeah.
without having it to go through the board approval process or
Right.
later questions about why did we go there?
Right.
Yeah.
Some of it is if you build it and you don't fill the beds, they're at a loss, operating loss for providers.
know.
So it's like this dance between, like Benjamin's Hope's building a new place, everybody's eyeing the spot, right? So like, if you build it and you can't fill it, then the way the system's designed, I can't pay an administrative rate, like to keep an open bed. I could do it 20 years ago, I can't do it now.
Right.
So it's like we're expecting at least 3 people might need this setting. So let's get going, or 4, and we're gonna get better at that. But right now, I'll get that number, but it's not a well-oiled machine just because of the nature of how you develop these placements, the costs that go into them, because we can't pay for building, like building the actual building.
Right.
So you have to find someone to do it. And then like, do you have somebody? Well, not now. Well, what do I do?
Mhm.
So it's this interesting ecosystem.
But even like a predictive analytics component to it, and then this way, maybe we could partner with builders in the
Yes, we
community.
could
to
put out an
say-
RFP.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
looking historically at what's happened and then kind of like our autism rates, for instance, and then also serious mental illness as
Yep.
well that might need placement, yeah, someplace to live. Any further discussion? Steve?
Yeah, I've got a follow-up on the Samaritas contract. I was wondering, Michael, you could follow up with a discussion about, I mentioned this before, I'm looking at that contract and I was struck by wondering why this training is not, done internally by staff. It's contracted out. And if nothing else, it will, I think, help me better understand the operations of the CMH and why we have this particular process for obtaining this training.
Yeah, this is okay. So part of our CCBHC obligations is the implementation of this specific evidence-based practice. So the first stage is, do we have anybody internally that knows it, that can train others? If the answer is no, we find someone that knows the evidence-based practice, train our staff, and then we can decide if it's a train the trainer model, which we replicate internally, or have that same individual come back with a new cohort or supervise them in that. So it's one of those things when we have to implement any new evidence-based practice that's mandated by contract or the state. If we don't have the internal resources to train our own folks, we have to go elsewhere first and then make that determination on should we have that as an internally trained thing. There are pros and cons to that. Sometimes it's good to have an evidence-based practice external expert that can come in and look at things like inter-rater reliability and how well we're training everybody and be a step away and give honest opinions. Are we implementing that evidence-based practice? Because if not, if it's totally internal, if you're following me, we can just say every year, yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, we're doing it. And we mentioned Dr. Lubers at one point in this discussion earlier today. He, at one point, was like an external person we use for integrated dual diagnosis treatment. It's a specific evidence-based practice we use. We built the infrastructure internally, and now we do it internally. But it was good for the first year or two to have an external purveyor of this say, yes, you're implementing it correctly. And then once we get a cohort trained within CMH, how do we keep the training going and who's eligible? will be another phase. So that's the cost benefit arrangement for this particular approach. External expertise to develop internal capacity, then to make a decision, what's sustainability for that evidence-based practice. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Chelsea, can we go to a roll call vote? And thank you very much, Bill. And motion on the table is to approve the July 2024 service contracts as presented by Bill Phelps.
Sir.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes. All right, moving on to fiscal year 2024 June financial statement, attachment B, Amy Babotel, Mass. Suggested motion is to approve the fiscal year 2024 financial statement as presented.
So moved.
All right, you have discussion?
So, the financials in the packet are through, period ending June 30th. That's our first 3 quarters of the year. We remain in healthy position for both, mental health fund and the millage and grants fund. Activity is right on schedule, budget, our revenues exceed our expenditures. You'll notice the total Medicaid funding is a slight bit behind, actuals are a slight bit behind budgeted, but that was, this report was run on the 19th. All of our funding, we received a bunch of payments on the 22nd. So even there, we're ahead, our revenues are already ahead, and we received even more payments. Good activity, good position. We're completing our projections for closing of fiscal year 24 and on a good trajectory to land with plenty of funding and so.
Any questions? Anything that concerns you? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. As I recall, this reporting is basically based on the cash method versus the accrual.
No.
It is actuals that our general ledger posted on the date that they run. So yes, it would be a cash basis, although we do accrue some of our revenues to the month, the period that they're related to. It doesn't really show here because we're reporting everything up to real time, or we're reporting everything up to real time. These are all actual expenditures, actual.
Any other questions? Is there anything, Amy, that concerns you or you feel like we're
The one thing,
We're in
and
a
this is
good
not a
place.
concern, it's just something that we're not, this is our first year in the CCBHC model. Some of the payment scheduling has been a little unpredictable. You'll see we had if you recall, last month we had a budget adjustment for the supplemental revenue payments. We have another this month because we can't really, we haven't gotten their schedule in line, and we want to make sure we have the revenues posted so that our expenditures are,
not
so we can
exceeding?
spend without having the receivable in hand. But other than that, and I think in general, the payments are being made. It's just something that regionally, they're working out the timing of that, and it's a whole schedule from the state paying the LRE to the LRE distributing the funds, kind of getting that all in line.
Adjustments for the new program. Yeah.
It's keeping us on our toes, but it's not a concern. The money is coming in. They're, only, we're in a healthy position. So,
Good, good to hear.
so.
All right, any other discussion? Questions? Seeing none, all right, we'll keep you in place too, but the motion on the table is to approve the FY 2024 July financial statement as presented. Go to roll call?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Passes, and moving on to F fiscal year 2025 proposed budget, see attachment C. Amy is our presenter once again. Suggested motion is to approve the FY 2025 proposed budget. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
And discussion. Is there anything?
Well, I guess put a little presentation together. This is something that we do annually.
Perfect.
We'll just run through, Chelsea, if you want to go ahead. Oh, let me see if this works. I don't know if it works.
Perfect.
It does work. Okay, I'm good. You're off the hook. No, I did that. Okay, so just a couple of things quickly. We'll talk quickly about the budget schedule, what happens when, big picture, how the budget is created, assumptions that we used for the fiscal year, and then presentation of the fund summaries for the proposed budget. Put together a calendar. This is very high level, but just to give you a sense of the timing of bringing together our previous year audited wrap up. So for fiscal year 23, it wraps up. We use, we're halfway through our current fiscal year in March, and we start budgeting countywide for the fiscal year 25. April comes along, Milliman, who is the state's actuarial, will do a rate analysis. They kind of publish what they think will happen with the state's rates. We adjust some of our internal service rates based on that information, based on statewide averages, based on our operational expenditures. May, we cost settle with the LRE for our prior year. So that's a factor if our numbers that were audited align with what happened in 23, what we reported in 23. At that time, also for the millage, this CMH board approves the mills that we're going to post for the following year's budget. July, today, is when we are presenting the fiscal year 25 proposed budget. And so between March and July, we've been working on all those details. What happens next in August? There is the Board of Commissioners will have a first review at the Finance Committee meeting on August 8th. We submit as a CMH a spending plan proposal, which is based on our budget that we're presenting today, to the LRE. So they have our numbers, our plan numbers in place, and they start doing a regional analysis and putting their budget together for the region. Public hearings happen in September at the county level for the county board, which the CMH budget is part of that process. There are dates there for the public hearing, September 10th, and then potential adoption date at the end of September. And our fiscal year starts October 1. What happens regionally is the LRE is still crunching numbers, and we don't get their final projected budgets until November, mid-November. Wow. So we kind of operate with assumptions up to that point. Revenues come in, but just so you're aware, that's a time where we look again at our budget. If anything changes, we have, that would be the time where you'd see that first amendment to our budget. And we close out our fiscal year 24 activity. So it kind of ties back to prior year. All of the activity kind of funnels in a regular schedule. For this year, our revenue assumptions, so money that's coming in for the mental health fund, based on the millimeter rates, based on the activity, we projected a 3.5% increase for our mental health services. We're projecting that enrollments will remain pretty consistent. We've had a year's time to have those redeterminations from the end of the public health emergency kind of fall off, and our numbers are leveling out. So we are projecting that we kind of have a good number for our enrollments. Continuation of our CCPHC supplemental funding. So that was something new to the mental health fund last year, and we're still a demonstration for that program. So we're anticipating the same supplemental funding. The overall projected change in revenues is just under 5 million. About 2 million of that is a shift from last year, where we went from a CCBHC grantee, to a demonstration. And when we were a grantee, that money, those revenues and expenditures were in the millage and grants fund. So we've moved that to our mental health fund. CCBHC is now a component of our Medicaid LRE distribution and a component of that Medicaid Healthy Michigan funding stream. Revenue assumptions for the millage and grants fund. The Treasury is projecting a tax increase based on, the housing market within Ottawa County. We have ongoing grant activity that's pretty consistent. Dr. Bashir has talked about the number of grants that we have, and those are mostly housed in this fund. The movement of the CCBHC revenues to mental health fund kind of impacted our projected change in revenue, so there's a slight reduction. As far as expenses, the mental health fund for this year, fiscal year 25, Dr. Brashear's requested 9 new full-time positions and multiple position upgrades. At the time that this was put together, we didn't have the number. I think it's 13 now upgraded positions, either reclassified or upgraded, that were requested based on change in credential needs. And I don't know if you needed to talk about that.
Yeah, I'll
more,
talk about
but
this in a moment. Yep.
yeah, we're projecting we assumed the 4% cost of living increase, which was the agreed upon amount for the new CMH union, and that also included the 3% health insurance increase for employees. There was an increase to county allocated central service costs that we implemented and assumed in this budget. And the change in expenditures is roughly 5 million as well. So about 2 million of that was the direct result of the CCBHC activity changing funds. The other 3 million kind of based on those other factors listed. The millage and grants fund, expense assumptions, new contracting for outpatient mental health service providers. So Dr. Brashear's talked about that. He did put some budget numbers in there for the programs that he was talking about. We're continuing existing grants, so that funding and expenses are still remain in that budget or in that fund. New requests for proposals for millage funded services. There's that's kind of an annual ongoing process, and we continue to retain budgets for all of those activities with slight reduction in overall expenditures, again partly due to the CCBHC activity. So the fund summaries themselves, you'll see for mental health and SUD budget, we're proposing a $67 million budget. If you look at this fund summary, it has the fiscal year 23 actuals. We have the fiscal year 24 adopted budget, which would be the budget that was presented in July, approved by the Board of Commissioners, and then an amended budget, which, we had that amendment. So The change on the far right column is from the adopted budget to the recommended. So if you notice, the amended budget did increase our revenues and expenditures for intergovernmental in this fund. A couple million, so that 5 million again goes back to moving those CCBHC activity into the mental health fund that happened between when we adopted the budget and we amended the budget. You know, we are presenting a pretty conservative budget with activities primarily increasing for both contracted services based on the service rates and then the staffing, salaries and benefits based on the
Negotiated.
cost of living increases. So for proposed millage and grants budget, same thing, consistent activity, nothing out of the ordinary budgeted, nothing, you know, some of those same revenue lines, or I guess there is a tax increase for revenue. The expense lines are, you know, pretty consistent and growing based on grant needs and then the budget that Dr. Bashir's put together for village funded programs. This is just a quick slide on where the money comes from. You know, kind of demonstrates 88.8% of our funding is funneled through the LRE in some way or another, whether grants or through Medicaid and all the other programs. So a big portion of where our money comes from, another sector obviously is property taxes and then grants and kind of the other smaller categories, collecting fees or the county's contribution and just general other revenues. And how we spend that money primarily is contracted services. So 63.96% of our budget goes to contractors directly. Next would be staff payroll and benefits, and then, you know, all the other operating expenses that we have that kind of fill in the rest of that budget. So.
Can I add a couple of points before you have questions? There's a lot to grasp with this.
I'm trying to see the colors.
Yeah.
Here's a quiz.
That's
I'm
really good.
aligning
Yeah,
the
I'm like,
colors with this.
I got it. So when you look at the process that was originally presented here, like the timeline, I'm going to be recommending some changes to the process of what comes to the CMH board before it goes to the county commission boards. It's some of the tension points, and sometimes it's beneficial of being a county department. So for instance, you noticed that was presented that Dr. Brashears is proposing 9 new positions in these upgrades. What I'm wanting to do this year is let the finance committee at the county level see, even if they're going to allow us to do it, because the county actually, and there's an approval process for that, because the county actually, in that one structure, approves all new positions if they're county employees. No other CMH besides the other county departments have this step. I am faced with this dilemma of like, in the future, what I'm going to want to do is bring to this board, hey, here's what I'm sending in the county process that they use. So this board is already aware of the positions I'm recommending. In the past, executive director CMH would give you information only about the positions and hear feedback. And this board wouldn't actually approve the positions because you delegate that to the executive director to manage the operation. But I do want a step where the CMH board, before we're even engaged in the county process of what will you allow, you're aware of them and why. And I tried to highlight some of them last time about changing support coordinator aides to full-blown support coordinators because of caseload sizes and whatnot. But from a logic model, starting the next fiscal cycle, this board will see any recommendations I give to the county for new positions before they're listed. So you know which ones. I was interim right in the middle of this process, like right at the time, near the end of the fiscal year, right? To do all that. And so there were some decisions I had to make just to see if the county would even approve it. The county and the county employees, to me, is like a big provider network for me. I have to make sure the provider network is okaying these positions before I even bring them to you. So this year, the process is a little bit, it mirrors what's happened before, but a little different than I'm going to be doing from year to year because just when I started. So in the future, you'll know what positions and why before the county even goes through their process of, can you do that? Because if we say yes and they say no, then I have to deal with it. Right now, if they say no, I have to deal with it from a different perspective. Like, well, I guess I'll use contract providers then for these things. So if you were looking at that, kind of, this is kind of backwards because it is. So now that we have a union contract, this is going to be vital because I don't control as executive director the negotiations of union contracts for county employees. I'm participatory in them, but there's no signature line for me or you. But all of the money that's paid for these services comes out of the money, the LRE and the Medicaid payments we get, which is your statutory obligation. So I just wanted to say my intent in August, because we'll know how the county does, is to say, here's the actual list, just so you know, of the people. Reclassifications are, they've had a change in certification, so they're going from one pay grade to another. You know, we may have a wage study next year just to look at all of the positions at the county level at CMH, which would be helpful. So that's some of the massaging that's going on here that makes it almost impossible for Amy to kind of do a logical presentation, even though I thought you did a great job, because there are different authorizing bodies. But it's my belief that this body is the primary body with the expenditures of Medicaid or Mental Health General Fund. And so in August, I'll bring back what was approved by the county commissioners to move forward, and I'll be there explaining it to them so you know exactly what positions we're talking about. I didn't want to bring that to you. I was going to this month, but then have the county say, no, you can't do that. And then I'm dealing with I want to resolve any conflicts with that before we have to meet. So that's on that. And you'll notice on the funding revenue sources, the county is giving us only what's required by law. 10% match and other little matches, like any county has to do with the CMH. So Ottawa County General Fund is paying for zero of any of those other expenses. So that's why it's more important that we're managing this effectively in our end. And the county's a good partner with it. I'm not saying they're not, but they're voting on something to tell us to use a funding source that you control. So there's a tension with that. So I'll keep my eye on it because if we do union negotiations and they negotiate a 10% increase, it's not in the Medicaid budget. How do we pay for it? So we'll be keeping a close eye on that and dealing with it. It's good to be a county department for a lot of reasons, but it does require us to have some tension points when it comes to this and your role and function. But hopefully her presentation gives you a sense of the calendar and we have to fit within that and make some determinations. So I just wanted to add some context to some of that.
I do have a question.
Yes, please.
The 10% county match is 10% of what?
Well, it might not be the exact percentage, it was close. It's like, there's a 10% of the local GF dollars. And then there's a small match we have from the county for some of our Medicaid, a piece of it, right? So I think it's like 400 and something thousand or out of 67 million,
And that's been static over the years.
the percentages, yeah,
No, the absolute dollars that the county has contributed
is based on a percentage.
is.
Mhm.
State general fund only.
Yeah.
It's not the
Right,
full
But
Medicaid.
the contribution towards Medicaid dollars
Is static.
is static.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though our Medicaid budget has
Right,
increased 10 times or
yes.
or 5 times more.
So, that's why the majority of CMHs are authorities. Because the county's not really, from a fiscal standpoint, participating in it besides what's required. So the other CMHs that are not county departments, there's the same local obligation, but there's none of the different committees and the county commissioners approving it. Now, the benefit of having us as a county department, there are many, stable workforce, good benefit package. You know, these are very important things that are reduced, in my opinion, our turnover significantly at CMH. But there are some questions about what, in my opinion, what the county commissioners are actually approving when they're not approving, when they're not actually, when the funding source is really under your control, right? So there are certain things the counties have to do as a county department. They have to approve our annual budget. The county commissioners have to approve the CMH annual budgets in the mental health code. They have to do that. They have to approve us to do an annual needs assessment. That's a requirement of a CMH as part of a county commissioner, right? So those two fundamental elements, and the county as a county department has the right to establish policies and procedures for the CMH department to follow in relation to operations, right? But those are the only three broad obligations of the county, as with CMH being a county department. So from a policy and procedure standpoint, we're using this process because that's the procedure of the county to do budgets. But it's not a requirement that they do it that way. Other county departments don't have the same, there's only a couple of other ones, same process. They have different policies and procedures they follow. So our county commissioners, when they're in various, let's say you're the chair of the finance committee, I happen to know one, right? You're looking at the CMH stuff and you're going, okay, do you have the money? And you're like, yes, okay. And the answer is kind of. So when we're making these proposals, it's not like we're doing these positions hella high water. If the revenue isn't there, we're not going to fill them. So, but we have to get the placeholders in place for the budget. But we're not saying we've already booked and we know for 100%. If there isn't enough dollars in the Medicaid to cover our proposed new positions, we don't fill them. So there's this interesting dynamic we have, and I'll keep people posted on. So far, the county's been great to work with since I've been back. John, the interim county administrator, has been great. Karen's been great. I haven't met the IT guy yet, but I'll eventually meet him.
Oh, he was in here earlier.
Yeah, human resources is great. You know, that's an interesting relationship and we're looking at it. But it's working well. That's all I had to add. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I just was curious. So we'll go through this dance here with the 9 new positions. Do we have any posted positions for CMH right now?
I think we have
filled,
some,
that are
but,
posted, not for 25.
right. Current year we do.
Okay,
Already approved ones, yeah.
right. And so those are going to roll off by 25? Is that I mean, do we have anything that's on the board right now that we have approved,
But not filled.
not filled? a
Yeah, if they're not
posted
filled, we'll either
position?
make a decision to keep trying or not to fill it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so part of your calculation that you offered there takes that in mind for the
Mm-hmm.
proposed change in expenditures of 5,200,000,
Yep.
takes in mind the ones that are already posted and potentially funded. I'm thinking
Well-
about the CCBHC positions. We approved 8 of them back in February of 23.
Yeah, I'd have to
And-
look to see how we did with those 8. Are they all filled? Are they all not filled? Those types of things.
Right.
But this budget doesn't actually budget in what you were saying, like if there are any positions, unless I'm wrong, interrupt me if I am, if there are any positions in 2024 we don't fill,
Mhm.
like that massaging for the 2025 budget, this is just what's proposed of what we're going to do. But the actual reality is not, of the past is not rolled into that.
Okay.
Did I do that right? Okay, great.
You're
Look
going
at
to
the
post
finance
these over
director.
time then too? You're gonna- are
Yeah,
you
one
gonna
thing I
put
don't
9 on
like
the
is having
board?
open positions that go more than one fiscal year.
Okay.
Our colleagues in Muskegon CMH just went through this. They had over 122 positions on the books that they did not fill,
Yes. Becomes a
or
mess.
close to that number, or
Yeah.
around that number. And they finally took them off the books. So they had all this kind of budgeted expense, but never real, and so they made a decision not to do that practice anymore.
Yeah,
we don't
Checking
do that.
FTEs can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
And overtime too, I'm sure you're tracking overtime, you pay a significant amount of overtime.
Yep.
So, all right, and then I did notice too that change in allocated charges for central services or increase in the county's allocated central services costs. Do you know, how is that calculated? Do you do by square feet or how do you?
We just get the numbers from fiscal. They work with, an actuarial firm that calculates that based on the amount of service, the cost of the services for those central service departments, and then it is square footage, and all based on square footage, but also the number of FTEs within that square
Sure.
footage. So it's like
They're servicing.
those factors.
Okay.
Yeah, but some of that, to be blunt, is what we pay to be a county department.
Mhm.
Access human resources, access finance, and there are good reasons to do that.
Yep.
The county, if they wanted to, and they've never done it in their history, so I'm not suggesting that they should do this, but they could charge all of those expenses to county general fund and not take that from the Medicaid service line. They could do that.
Mhm.
They'd have to do it every year. But we pay with the mental health budget, all of the HR we get from the county, all of the fiscal services from the county, all of the facilities. And it's beneficial, but that's coming from the Medicaid primarily funding sources. Now, one part of that comes out of the county general fund. Not all departments have that arrangement. Some other departments, they get money from the county general fund because there is no other funding source and it's a county thing. But I'm just pointing out that several million bucks or whatever it is could come out of county general fund if the county commissioners wanted to. It's up to you. But we are paying it with Medicaid dollars, which has been our history forever. So that's how it works. But it's just when we have a shortage of Medicaid and say we don't give CMH employees a raise because there's no Medicaid, we're still charged the county cost of those positions from Medicaid. So I want to bring up that particular tension point, and it's not something I want to harp on every month, but you should be aware of that.
And there was a discussion with the commissioners, I think I can disclose that when we were talking about union negotiations, about not having that happen to the CMH employees ever again.
Right.
So what we can do on our part as commissioners to prevent that from happening.
Great.
All right. Mr. Byrd.
Just to try to put things in perspective, Mr. Rockman asked a question earlier about are we on a cash basis or accrual basis? The way I understand it, we have a Medicaid budget of $63,000 some $100 from the LRE. That's not our money to spend at our discretion. That's an approved budget by the LRE. But if we're basically on a fee for service basis, we provide a service to a consumer that's Medicaid eligible, and we either pay that directly from our operating funds and get reimbursed by the LRE, or the LRE pays that. So that's a fee for service. And if we provided no services, let's say we provided 25% less services next year to our consumers, for whatever the reason, we'd still have overhead that we could charge for our employees and our buildings and our
Sure.
electricity or wherever else we're paying to the LRE for allowable Medicaid operating expenses. So from one standpoint, Michael, I don't know that if we spend all of our Medicaid money that's allocated to us from the LRE on services and they had no more money to give us, are you saying that we then couldn't fill these positions? Well, to balance our budget, we couldn't. But if we hired the people and had them on our payroll and we're paying them for the
Right.
year, at the end of the year, we either are over budget with the LRE and
Yep.
have a deficit that they have to find a way to fill, or we have underspent our Medicaid budget from the LRE because we haven't needed to bill for services that weren't needed. So
Yeah,
we are.
it's
on a
actually
cash
a
basis.
little bit worse than you think. So we're not a fee for service arrangement. We get capitated amount of dollars in 12 equal payments from the LRE based on what Milliman, long story, said that they should be the rates for our region. And then we use encounter codes to validate the use of the Medicaid dollars. So there isn't a one-to-one relationship between a service and pulling down like fee for service. It's we get the payments and we have to demonstrate the appropriate amount of utilization of that Medicaid dollars, right? So that, and we're not allowed as a board to have a Medicaid savings account. So if we manage it well, we don't get to keep it in a rainy day fund and go, oh, we're doing it. The region has the rainy day fund called the Internal Service Fund, ISF. And we have, if we over expenditure what we were given in those 12 things, we have to ask for use of the Internal Service Fund, rainy day fund, or make adjustments in our expenses to meet budget. So I wish it was a fee for service arrangement. Because I'll tell you, there's enough utilization where we'd get all kinds of Medicaid. And it used to be like that before 1995. Okay, so the CMHs got paid in what they do. Right now, we get paid equal amounts of Medicaid. This is just in general for the big funding source Medicaid every month, regardless of how much we provide and regardless of how many show up. So in the system, there's an inherent conflict to not serve. The more you serve, the more you're serving from the same pot of money. So there's not a built-in incentive, even though we try to reach out as much as we can, for CMH to go look for people to serve. So that's why it's worse than you think. Because if it was fee for service, I'll tell you what, we'd be serving everybody with twice the staff and pulling in twice the money. And Dave's been around long enough to know when it was almost all fee for service back in the old days. And that's why we went to a managed care model. And that's why we have the LRE in the first place. So this makes her job almost impossible, keeping up with encounters, booking that as an expense to validate Medicaid, not really knowing the rate of Medicaid we're going to really get because it changes. I'm tired just thinking about it. But that's the complexity of what you're facing in fiscal, and what we're dealing with is where get the money up front and serve anybody that shows up who's eligible, regardless of how much money you have. If it was fee for service, oh my goodness, we would have a $120 million Medicaid budget. I could literally just say, whoever comes in, you're bringing in revenue. The conflict is there, you might overserve.
Mhm.
You might overserve because there's a fiscal advantage for you to do that,
Yeah.
a conflict. So we're encounter-based, which is like fee for service within a capitated or equal payment system, which makes it extremely challenging.
A very good explanation. Yep.
Very good. It's funny, we have that system though set in place in our health systems and private practices.
Yeah, you go to Priority Health and you see your doctor, they bill the service, they get paid agreed upon rate. They don't get, in most arrangements, a monthly payment and say, you have to do everything that you've agreed to, no matter how many show up. So, I wish,
Yeah, thus the role of a gatekeeper.
right.
It says, we're gonna let you provide 3 outpatient sessions to your client. And then they want to see, what are the outcomes? What are you doing? You know, so it's not like a credit card where you're just able to
Charge away.
see them as long as you feel it's clinically necessary.
Yeah, and our model works well if we're all doing our job well.
Yeah.
But it's complicated and it's like, it defies normal business
Yeah.
logic.
It's bizarre.
So if you're sitting there and you have good business logic going, this sounds like the opposite of what that's right, it's true. And there are good reasons why it's like that. It's to protect an entitlement versus a service. Our services for Medicaid are entitlements. You're owed it. So we had to make sure the CMH has enough money to at least try, versus if it's just a benefit, then you can say who's eligible for the benefit, who's not, and all that stuff. These are entitlements. We shall provide, not may provide, the service with the pot of money we get. That's why we have to fight for more money all the time. I'm good at that, so we'll see how we do.
You got the
Yeah.
legalese down, that's for certain.
Yeah,
Shall and
Oh,
may.
He comes in spot checks.
Yeah, they do more in spot check. The LRE does 8 million audits a year, trust me.
Yeah.
Because they have to make sure.
Mhm.
Any further questions? All right, so the motion on the floor is to approve fiscal year 2025 proposed budget. And we'll go to a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, motion passes. Moving on to BA2, mid-year revenue adjustments, see attachment D. Amy, you're up again. Suggested motion is to approve the BA2 mid-year revenue adjustments. Do I have a motion
So moved.
Support.
and discussion?
So I just mentioned earlier, these are the supplemental revenue payments that we receive. We have a budget, but we're adjusting based on actuals received. We didn't know what to expect as far as supplemental payments, so we're kind of inching along, increasing our budget as we go. But
Any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and we'll keep you there. Then go to a vote. This is a roll call vote as well.
Yes.
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 yes,
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Ooh, now we're just on to the review of the LRE May 2024 financial report. Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, no, it's
Oh, goodness,
it's a journey.
almost there.
so this is the combined FSR for the region through, reporting through the end of May, just for general information. You know, we continue, it's kind of, I don't know if there are questions. It's one of those documents that, good snapshot of where we are in comparison to other regions. The big thing is our actuals, our revenues exceed our expenses. So that's kind of what we're targeting. Some of the details where the projections, you'll notice, we are projected to have a deficit, but that's really based on the LRE's revenue projections for our projected expenditures. So we kind of shore that up as we get closer to the end. The LRE is saying, no, you probably won't use this much, and we want to preserve what we're projecting for for expenses. So they kind of compete for a little while until we resolve at the end. You know, if you look at the, you know, so it's always mirroring their revenue projections to our projected expense. So they're not going to want to project more than they think we'll need.
Sure.
But I want to project more expense than we
Right.
may need, so we don't have a short.
Have a deficit at the end, yeah.
That's kind of how that works. And everybody in the region kind of does their numbers a little differently. So you'll notice there's a lot of variance.
Hmm.
I report on actuals and a calculation where we are within the month of the year, you know, which period we're in. So, you know, some of the fluctuation is what revenues we've actually received at the time of the report. But again, still in hope. This is May, so we're into June and we're still in for us.
Any other questions of Amy, who's probably been up here for now about, what, 40 minutes now? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
And item 10 is general information, comments and meetings attended. I don't have anything on the agenda for that. And so we're up to public comment number 2. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and say this meeting is adjourned.
Ooh.
That was tight.
Sorry, Dave.
Things in there.